Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Hence, Cantori immediately took a step to the side, and sneeringly said, "President Flick, if you regret what you've done that day, there's still a chance for you to redeem yourself. As long as you apologize to Harquis sincerely, he might choose to forgive you because he's very magnanimous." Harquis initially thought that he had managed to stop Cantori, but he didn't expect Cantori to make things worse for him. "What a joke. You want President Flick to apologize to me? If Father and the other elders find out, they'll skin me alive." Cantori didn't really intend to resolve the conflict between the two of them, but rather he knew right from the beginning that Lin Li would not apologize. In fact, this was exactly the same trick that he played at King Bradler's palace previously. He just wanted Lin Li to reject the suggestion, and end up provoking Harquis. After what happened last time, Cantori was already clear that he couldn't rely on the Gilded Kingdom, or the Illuminati to deal with Lin Li. Hence, he thought of using Harquis of the Octopus clan, which was one of the 7 hegemons of the sea that was not inferior to the Gilded Kingdom. In fact, the incident that happened at the market previously made Cantori think that he was about to succeed. However, to his surprise, Harquis didn't do anything else after kicking up a ruckus and taking the stained Mageth back with him. Of course, he would have never been able to guess how shocked the great monarch and grand elder of the Octopus clan were after Harquis brought it back to them. He merely thought that the Octopus clan couldn't be bothered to hold it against Lin Li. Cantori believed that if Lin Li said something outrageous this time, Harquis would definitely be angered further, and not let Lin Li off easily again. However, before Lin Li could say anything, Harquis suddenly waved his hand with a look of dismay, and said, "There's no need for that, Cantori. We're pressed for time, and we didn't come here for this. It's more important to do what we have to." However, Harquis couldn't bring himself to appear deferential towards Lin Li, and had no choice but to use their limited time as an excuse to leave as quickly as possible. Harquis' words made Cantori more or less disappointed, but he didn't dwell on it. He didn't think that Harquis, the young monarch of the Octopus clan, would be afraid of Lin Li, the president of the Tower of Dusk. After all, Harquis had a point. The secret merchant market would only be open for a short period of time, so if they wasted too much time there, others might buy all the good things that they wanted. Cantori merely glared at Lin Li resentfully before turning around to say to Harquis, "Harquis, you're right. We shouldn't waste our precious time on someone so unrepentant. Someone here just doesn't know how to treasure such a great opportunity to get to know a master of inscription. What a pity." Cantori wanted to say something to spite Lin Li further, but the latter was acting as if he hadn't heard him at all. He merely continued to browse every stall belonging to a secret merchant. From time to time, he would slow down to look at some of the items at the stall. Lin Li's reaction made Cantori feel as if he was talking to a wall, which was really upsetting. Hence, although he changed his mind and decided not to talk about Harquis Mageth again, he didn't really leave with Harquis immediately. Instead, he stayed close to Lin Li. However, Cantori had no idea that his behavior had not only had no effect on Lin Li, but it even made Harquis, who was beside him, feel extremely uneasy. Harquis wanted to stay far away from Lin Li so that he would at least have a suitable excuse when his father and the elders asked about it. However, Harquis couldn't leave alone without Cantori. Whenever he secretly avoided Lin Li and stayed far away from him, he would end up getting dragged towards Lin Li by Cantori. To be honest, if not for the long-time friendship between him and Cantori, Harquis would have slapped Cantori to death. Although there were now 2 more pests following him, Lin Li didn't take it to heart at all. Instead, he continued to do what he had to, treating the both of them like they were non-existent. On the other hand, Connorus and Angelano naturally couldn't be bothered about the two of them. They had lived for thousands of years. Cantori's little tricks were childish, and it wasn't worth their time and effort at all. Lin Li would stop from time to time while shopping. After browsing through more than 10 stalls, he finally showed a change in expression when he saw the things at a certain stall. He was looking at a fist-sized black sphere that was probably like an enlarged version of a black pearl. As soon as he looked at the black sphere, his attention was immediately drawn to it because it contained a massive death aura. "Ah, you've got great judgment, sir. This is the nether pearl that we paid a great price to obtain from the nether sea. Look at its luster and mana fluctuations. It's definitely at the peak of the legendary level. If this is embellished on a magic staff, it'll definitely be a powerful tool for a mage," said the masked secret merchant. He immediately gave Lin Li a pompous introduction of the pearl when he saw that Lin Li seemed to have taken a liking to the pearl. The Endless Ocean was actually just a general term for the Boundless Ocean. The various regions of the Endless Ocean actually each had a specific name. For example, the region ruled by the Octopus clan was known as the Black Sea, while the area ruled by the Giant Shark clan was known as the Red Sea, and the area ruled by the Siren clan was known as the Luminous Sea. The Nether Sea had a different name in the beginning, the Sea of Abundance, and was the most fertile sea region in the Endless Ocean. That was precisely the reason that the Sea of Abundance naturally became the sea area that many coveted and vied for. There were countless intense battles that caused countless sea clans to perish, and the death aura gradually spread throughout the entire oceanic region, causing the Sea of Abundance to become a death sea. Compared to Anril, the area of the Endless Ocean was countless times larger, and there was naturally a shocking number of Sea Clan members there too. Legend had it that as many as tens of billions of Sea Clan members had died in the Great War of the Sea that spread through the Endless Ocean back then. If all the corpses of the Sea Clan were thrown onto Anril, there would be enough to bury Anril under them. The famous land of the undead, the Nether Valley, which was located near Alana, had become a dead land, because the High Elves had launched a massacre that resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths. The Sea Clan members that died in the Nether Sea amounted to as many as hundreds of millions or even a billion. Under the pollution of the death aura, it was no wonder that the former Sea of Abundance turned into the Nether Sea. In the current Endless Ocean, the Nether Sea could be considered an absolute land of the dead that no living being would dare to go near. Even when one was in the periphery of the Nether Sea, their vitality would be devoured irreversibly, not to mention within the Nether Sea. Even if one made it out alive, they would not be able to live for long. Besides, the erosion of the death aura was only one aspect. The more terrifying threat was the undead creatures of the Sea Clan that dwelt in the Nether Sea. Even if only a tenth, or even 1% became undead creatures, it would still be a terrifying number. Fortunately, there seemed to be a certain force in the Nether Sea that bound the undead creatures of the Sea Clan to it. Otherwise, there would probably be a massive disaster. However, it wasn't that living beings were absolutely non-existent in the Nether Sea. Well, at least there was a type of giant sea mussel that the people were aware of. It was called the giant Moro mussel, and still lived in the undead region of the sea. The Nether Pearl, which the secret merchant mentioned, was a product formed by the giant Moro mussels after devouring death aura. It was said that the giant Moro mussels had another name in the beginning, giant colorful mussels, and produced colorful pearls emitting various rays of light instead of nether pearls. The colorful pearls contained magical power that could make the products in the sea grow rapidly, which was an important reason that the sea was called the Sea of Abundance. The current giant Moro mussels were not undead creatures, but were largely different from real living beings. They could be considered half-dead. Legend had it that the giant Moro mussels continuously devoured the undead aura in the Nether Sea, and condensed it into nether pearls in their bodies, all for the sake of purifying it in the Nether Sea, in hopes that they could recreate the glory of the Sea of Abundance. However, countless years had passed, but the Nether Sea did not change in the slightest because of the existence of the giant Moro mussels. Instead, the death aura even became richer and affected the area above the sky. Even on days with fair weather, the sky above the Nether Sea would still be covered in gray clouds that not a single ray of sunlight could penetrate. Just like the secret merchant said, the Nether Pearl was indeed considered a holy artifact of a necromancer. If a necromancer owned a Nether Pearl, he would be able to cast the Tide of Death easily even if he was only at the level of the Archmage. He almost wouldn't have to worry about the burden on his mana that the Tide of Death would bring about. At the same time, necromancers would be able to reach the legendary realm easily as long as they kept the Nether Pearl with them and sense the death energy in the Nether Pearl at all times. For legendary level necromancers, the Nether Pearl boasted great benefits too. For example, when embellished on a magic staff, it would be akin to putting necromancers in a reservoir of mana, and also significantly improve the success rate of legendary level necromagic spells. Of course, this thing was not of much use to Lin Li. However, he had a lot of subordinates who were undead creatures. Apart from his undead servants Ufalusi and Norfaler, there were also dozens of Retribution Knights in the Black Front Fortress. If a level 20 Retribution Knight could have a weapon that was embellished with a Nether Pearl, his power would probably reach level 22 or level 23. Unfortunately, there was only one Nether Pearl for sale at the stall of this secret merchant, which was far from enough to be equipped on all the Retribution Knights under Lin Li. He could only equip the leader of the Retribution Knights with it so that the other Retribution Knights could also have their strength augmented along with the increase in their leader's strength. At the thought of this, Lin Li reached out to pick up the Nether Pearl after obtaining the permission of the secret merchant. It was actually really different from ordinary items. As soon as Lin Li's fingertip touched it, he immediately sensed a penetrative chilliness that spread down his finger. As a sanctuary powerhouse, Lin Li managed to block the chilliness, but if a legendary level powerhouse was in his place, they would probably be at a huge disadvantage. After picking up the Nether Pearl, Lin Li channeled his mental strength into it to check the level of power within it as well as the composition of its laws, only to receive a huge disappointment. The nether pearl was near the peak of the legendary level, and the mana seemed to be pure, but the composition of laws seemed to be very disorganized. It might seem contradicting, but it wasn't difficult to achieve that, as long as one could channel the mana generated within outwards using some special means. The nether pearl could temporarily have a relatively pure undead power. The secret merchant didn't expect Lin Li to scrutinize the nether pearl inside out after picking it up to have a look. Thinking that Lin Li really intended to buy it, he hurriedly said, "Rest assured, sir, this nether pearl is definitely genuine. You may take it home with you, with 5 million gold coins." Hearing this, Lin Li couldn't help but sneer, and thought to himself, "This nether pearl is genuine, but it's of inferior quality. How dare you sell it for 5 million gold coins? What an unscrupulous merchant indeed." In fact, counterfeit goods were not the majority of the goods in the secret merchant market, but goods of inferior quality were. For example, a merchant might brag about a powerful ancient magical weapon in an exaggerated manner, but in fact, it could only be used once. Another example would be a magical prop that might really contain terrifying power, but no one knew what price they had to pay after using it. The same went for the nether pearl. Although its mana was close to the peak of the legendary level, its basic laws were very messy, which was the reason that its true value plummeted. If a necromancer had a magic staff inlaid with a nether pearl, not only might his strength not increase, he might suffer physical damage too. Be it necromancers or undead creatures, the source of power did not come from magical crystals, but rather was generated from the burning of the soul fire. The death energy in the nether pearl was like the fuel for soul fire. The consequences of using impure fuel were imaginable. For example, if gasoline of inferior grade was added to a car that required superior quality gasoline, there would be a huge impact on the engine of the car. Hence, in Lin Li's opinion, the nether pearl was worth less than 50,000 gold coins, let alone 5 million. However, Lin Li's disappointment was fleeting, and he soon remembered some of the tricks that those unscrupulous merchants would often pull. Selling an inferior item like it was of superior grade was one of such tricks. Another trick would be to take advantage of the shopper's lack of knowledge, to sell them the inferior goods. On the one hand, they didn't want to let the inferior item seem unattractive after being compared to the item that was of superior quality. On the other hand, they wanted to use this opportunity to raise the price of goods of better quality. If the inferior item could be sold for 5 million gold coins, the one of superior quality had to cost at least 10 million gold coins. Hence, in Lin Li's opinion, this secret merchant might have more than one inferior quality nether pearl, or in fact, even more nether pearls, that were truly of a good quality. Although it was only his conjecture, there was still a high possibility that it was true. After all, if he had paid such a huge price to go to the nether sea, how could he have gotten only one nether pearl? However, as Lin Li was about to ask the secret merchant to show him a nether pearl of a better quality, Kantori, who had been tagging along, walked over. "Ha! Nether pearl!" Kantori exclaimed pretentiously, as if he had just discovered the nether pearl. He then asked the secret merchant, "How much do you plan to sell this nether pearl for?" Kantori was not a necromancer, so the necromagic wasn't of any use to him. In that case, he was clearly trying to create trouble for Lin Li again. He had been following Lin Li around just for the sake of finding a chance to irk Lin Li. Of course, Kantori did not just blindly vie with Lin Li for whatever he wanted to buy, because that would be too foolish. He had some understanding of the Tower of Dusk, and was aware that Lin Li had 2 undead servants. Moreover, the nether pearl was the holy artifact of undead creatures, so Kantori was certain that Lin Li really planned to buy the nether pearl. Seeing that there was another person asking about the nether pearl, the secret merchant immediately became interested as he quickly answered, "Sir, you must have a good understanding of the nether pearl. This one has reached the peak of the legendary level, but I'm selling it for only 5 million gold coins. Even a legendary magical crystal costs more than 5 million gold coins, but this nether pearl has many more functions and uses than a legendary magical crystal. 5 million gold coins is too expensive. I'll take it if you lower the price to 4 million gold coins," said Kantori, who didn't raise the price immediately, and instead bargained to lower it a little. However, Kantori didn't have any good intentions in lowering the price, nor did he really intend to buy the nether pearl. In fact, even a nether pearl of the best quality was worth only less than 2 million gold coins. Although Kantori bargained for a lower price, it was still much higher than what it was really worth, and he did that so as to prevent Lin Li from lowering the price any further. Although Kantori had asked for a discount of an entire 1 million gold coins, the secret merchant did not lose his temper, because he knew clearly how much the nether pearl really cost. Even if he sold it for 4 million gold coins, he would still be earning a huge profit. Hence, after Kantori quoted the price, The secret merchant turned to Lin Li and asked, "Sir, what price would you like to offer?" It was not a proper store, where items were usually sold on a first-come first-served basis. In the secret merchant market, the only rule that applied when making deals was that the highest bidder won. Although it was not an auction, it was similar to one. However, to the surprise of the secret merchant and Kantori, Lin Li smiled faintly and put the nether pearl back on the display without any reluctance. He then said, 4 million gold coins is still too expensive. In this case, he can have the pearl. He decided not to buy it just like that. Kantori was dumbfounded. He initially thought that he would stop raising the price further even if Lin Li offered 4 million gold coins, because Lin Li would already make a huge loss if he were to buy it at that price. However, he didn't expect that Lin Li would give up on the nether pearl without even raising the price by a single gold coin. In that case, he would have to buy that nether pearl. President Flick, I'm really sorry. I forgot that you have 2 undead servants under you. They should need this nether pearl more than me. Forget it, I'll let you have this nether pearl, said Kantori. Although Kantori had brought enough money with him to the secret merchant market, he couldn't waste his money on useless things. If he were to spend 4 million gold coins on the nether pearl, that was useless to him, he would have to buy fewer of the items that he really needed, which would not be a cost-effective trade-off at all. Seeing that Lin Li had decided not to buy the nether pearl, the secret merchant thought that he could at least sell it to Kantori. Anyway, even if he sold it for 4 million gold coins, he would still make a huge profit. However, to his surprise, Kantori decided not to buy it either. His spirits were immediately dampened, and he looked at the both of them while trying to persuade them to change their minds. You two should stop giving in to each other. This nether pearl is not an ordinary item. I dare say that I'm the only one who's selling a nether pearl here in the entire secret merchant market. If you miss this opportunity, you never know when you'll be able to buy such a fine nether pearl again. However, Lin Li still shook his head and pointed at Kantori while saying to the secret merchant, "Sorry, I can't afford 4 million gold coins. Doesn't the rule of highest bidder wins work here? You can sell the pearl to anyone who can afford it." The secret merchant was stunned for a while, and he seemed to have realized something. He then turned to Kantori with some displeasure and said, "Sir, you should know the rules here. This may not be a proper auction, but the rule of the highest bidder wins still applies. Since you've won the bid, don't tell me you can't afford this price." He managed to compel Kantori and put him in a difficult spot with just a simple sentence. The identities of the secret merchants were kept confidential, but the identities of the guests were not. Even though Kantori was the son of the Gilded Kingdom's Chancellor and the disciple of the Lord of the Illuminati, he would still be listed as an unwelcome guest if he were to break the rules of the secret merchant market. In the future, he would no longer be permitted entry into any secret merchant market. The secret merchant's words were infuriating for Kantori too. "What do you mean I can't afford it? If I can't even afford to spend 4 million gold coins, I wouldn't have come to the secret merchant market at all." Considering the consequences in his pride, Kantori secretly gritted his teeth and bore with the pinch of having to part with his money. Fine, 4 million gold coins, not a single one less. The only thing that made Kantori feel better was that although he could not use the nether pearl that he had bought with 4 million gold coins, he could resell it to others and at least recoup some of his losses. What really made Kantori upset was the fact that he had failed to scheme against Lin Li and even ended up making a fool of himself. The secret merchant and Kantori quickly completed the transaction. Seeing that Lin Li was still around, Kantori sneered, "Why? You must be disappointed, President Flick. If the nether pearl was given to undead creatures, it'd be even more useful than any artifact. I may not be able to use it, but I know a few necromancers, and I believe they'll need it." Kantori was enraged too, for his plan to scheme against Lin Li failed, and he even ended up losing 4 million gold coins while embarrassing himself. Of course he'd be displeased. However, he still felt that Lin Li needed the nether pearl desperately, so he was indignant and tried to get back at Lin Li. At this point Angelano, who was at the side, said to Lin Li, "Flick, why did you let him have that thing? You're not short of money anyway. That skeleton Ufalusi needs to break through to the sanctuary realm, doesn't he? He should have a higher chance of breaking through if he has this thing, right?" As soon as Angelano said that, Kantori began to get conceited again. Holding the box containing the nether pearl in one hand, Kantori stared at the nether pearl like he was admiring a piece of art. While looking at it, he said, "Ah, this is a legendary level nether pearl. Even a necromancer who has just entered the legendary realm can exert the power of a peak legendary powerhouse if he's wearing this. If a peak legendary powerhouse got it, wouldn't he be able to reach the sanctuary realm?" Kantori seemed to be murmuring to himself, but if associated with what Angelano said, it was obvious that he was directing his words at Lin Li. However, Lin Li laughed nonchalantly and turned his head to say to the secret merchant, "Well, you've already sold the inferior goods at a high price. You should take out the item of superior quality now. The secret merchant also said that he was the only person who sold nether pearls in the entire secret merchant market. Others might think that he meant that he had sold the one and only nether pearl in the secret merchant market to Kantori. However, in Lin Li's opinion, the secret merchant clearly meant that he had more nether pearls for sale. Hearing Lin Li's words, the secret merchant could not help but be stunned for a while, but he didn't feel embarrassed. Anyway, in this secret merchant market, goods that had been sold couldn't be refunded, so the secret merchant didn't have to worry about making Kantori displeased. He wasn't ashamed that he had sold an inferior item to Kantori, either. As long as the rules of the secret merchant market were not violated, all transactions would be protected by the secret merchants alliance. However, Kantori was a bit dissatisfied with Lin Li's words as he squinted at Lin Li and snapped, "Don't crack wise just because you've missed the opportunity yourself. Besides, who are you to say that I bought an inferior item? I know what you're thinking. You just want to undermine the value of this nether pearl, and then find a way to buy it from me at a low price, right? Unfortunately, I'm not going to fall for your trick. This nether pearl is truly at the peak of the legendary level." Angelano was a little confused too. He looked at the nether pearl in Kantori's hand and asked Lin Li, "Flick, is what he bought not a nether pearl?" Although Lin Li couldn't be bothered to care about Kantori, he wouldn't miss the opportunity to rub salt into his wound. Hence, he explained to Angelano, the composition of laws in that nether pearl is very chaotic, and the power of death contained in it seems to be somewhat purer only because someone managed to channel the mana of other laws out of it using some special means. If necromancers were to use this, their soul fire might even be extinguished, let alone have their strength improved. As soon as the secret merchant heard Lin Li's explanation, he knew that Lin Li was an expert in this field. He turned around and took out from behind himself a larger crystal box which contained numerous neatly arranged nether pearls. He placed the crystal box in front of Lin Li and said, "Sir, there are a total of 39 nether pearls here that range from the beginner legendary levels to the peak. Of course, the price varies too." Upon sight of the box of nether pearls, Kantori, who was ready to refute Lin Li, was also a bit dumbfounded. At this juncture, even a fool would realize that he had fallen into the cunning merchant's trap, or rather Lin Li's trap too. However, as a regular customer of the secret merchant market, he also knew the rules here, and had no choice but to suppress his resentment. He gritted his teeth and looked at Lin Li. "Even if my nether pearl is inferior, it still cost 4 million gold coins. If there's one of top quality, I'm afraid it'd cost at least 10 million gold coins." Kantori knew that if what Lin Li said was true, his plan to resell the pearl to recoup his losses wouldn't work. Hence, he decided to go all out and try to use the price that he had bought his nether pearl at to raise the prices of the nether pearls in the box that the merchant was carrying to make Lin Li suffer a loss. The secret merchant naturally would not miss the opportunity to make money, so he immediately went along with Kantori's words and introduced to Lin Li, "Look, sir, the price of this peak legendary level nether pearl is 16 million gold coins, while this one at level 23 costs 12 million gold coins. I also have some that are level 21 and level 22, those cost 9 million gold coins, and this level 21 costs 6 million gold coins." Hearing the exorbitant prices that the secret merchant had quoted, Kantori finally felt less displeased. Even a level 20 nether pearl costs 6 million gold coins. How can the tiny Tower of Dusk have so much money? Let's see how you can still pretend this time. However, after listening to the secret merchant's offer, Lin Li kept a straight face and nodded slightly before saying, "That's quite a reasonable price. I'll take the entire box." Both Kantori and the secret merchant were astonished to hear Lin Li's words, and the first thought that came to their minds was that Lin Li had to be crazy. Yes, even the secret merchant himself didn't think that his nether pearls were worth that much money. However, he was out to earn money, so he quoted such a high price. Kantori sneered and glanced at Lin Li in disdain before mocking, "I didn't expect you to be so rich and generous, President Flick. Are you planning to sell the Sky Castle?" In Kantori's opinion, even if the Tower of Dusk had great power in the breezy plains, they were still just a local force, and he thought that it would be impossible for Lin Li to get that much money at once. Of course, Kantori knew that Lin Li had another identity, and that was the fourth arbitrator of the Supreme Council. However, the Supreme Council did not belong to him alone, so how could they possibly pay such a huge sum of money for him? The secret merchant also swallowed his saliva with great difficulty and stammered, "Sir, are you taking everything?" "Yes." Lin Li smiled and looked at the secret merchant. "However, you have to reduce the price by 90% of whatever you quoted just now." "What? Reduce the price by 90%? Damn it, That won't be enough to cover my cost price. Is he playing a prank on me? The secret merchant almost vomited blood after hearing Lin Li's request. Sir, you're going a little too far with your joke. Are you sure? You know where you are now? The secret merchant questioned in a hostile tone. In fact, anyone would react the same way, although the buyer would tend to bargain for the lowest price possible. Asking for a 90% discount was a very insincere offer. However, Lin Li was not anxious at all. He glanced at the box filled with nether pearls, and said, "It seems that you are not too satisfied with this price. How about I give you a method to safely enter and exit the nether sea in exchange?" What? The secret merchant instinctively felt that it was impossible. He had paid a huge price to enter the nether pearl, and he merely managed to painstakingly harvest these nether pearls at the periphery of the nether sea. Since the nether sea had been formed, countless people had brainstormed for ways to enter the nether sea and comb it for the treasures that had gone missing there during the Great War of the Ocean. However, they usually ended up becoming the undead creatures of the nether sea. Not to mention the average person, even sanctuary powerhouses would not be able to resist the erosion of the death aura in the nether sea. How could anyone be able to safely enter and leave the nether sea? Kantori, who was at the side, couldn't help but burst into laughter as he said, "President Fulik, are you joking? I bet you've never even seen the nether sea before, have you? Trust you to have the cheek to deceive others with that. If you have that ability, why would you have to come here to buy nether pearls? You can jolly well go pick some yourself." Being a native of the Gilded Kingdom, Kantori naturally was no stranger to the situation in the nether sea. Even his teacher, the Lord of the Illuminati, couldn't delve deep into the nether sea. Hence, he didn't believe Lin Li knew of a method that would allow people to enter and leave the nether sea safely at will. Besides, just as he said, if Lin Li could really enter and leave the nether sea freely, he didn't have to tell anyone about it, as he could have free access to the resources in the nether sea. However, in the face of the questioning, Lin Li seemed to be unaffected as he nonchalantly asked the secret merchant, "So, are you going to accept this deal or not?" Seeing how confident Lin Li was, the secret merchant couldn't help but waver, especially since he knew that he was facing a sanctuary powerhouse. Besides, he had also heard of Lin Li's glorious deeds in the Gilded Kingdom, which left him with no choice but to consider the possibility of Lin Li having a feasible method. If he could really enter and exit the nether sea freely, he would be able to obtain massive benefits from it. Nether pearls were not the only thing that existed in the Sea of Abundance. "Oh, are you serious?" the secret merchant asked, feeling like he was being silly too. However, his nature as a merchant compelled him to avoid missing such an opportunity, regardless of how absurd it seemed. Lin Li nodded, and casually said, "The method is very simple, and there is no harm for me to tell it to you now. You just need some nether servant's blessing potions, and you'll be able to prevent erosion by the death aura in the sea." Although the nether servant's blessing potion is a less commonly known potion, there are pharmacists who can concoct it. Nether servant's blessing potion. I've only heard of light blessing potion, darkness blessing potion, and elemental blessing potion. I've never heard of a nether servant's blessing potion. Even if it exists, it's probably a curse that turns living beings into undead creatures, isn't it? Kantori couldn't help but mock with a disdainful expression when he heard that Lin Li's so-called method was actually to use such a bizarre potion. That secret merchant also looked at Lin Li in disbelief, but he didn't question Lin Li right away like Kantori did. Instead, he waited to hear Lin Li explain further. The nether servant's blessing potion temporarily transforms the user into an undead form so that he or she wouldn't be eroded by the death aura anymore. Once the user is exposed to the sunlight, or is in an environment with insufficient death aura, the power of the nether servant's blessing potion will be dissolved quickly by the sunlight, thus allowing the user to revert back to being a living being. Lin Li explained briefly the function of the nether servant's blessing potion without looking at Kantori. If it was used on pure undead creatures, it would at best result in a small increase in their strength, which would be rather insignificant. When used on living beings, it would allow them to temporarily have the undead aura of undead creatures without truly turning into one. For example, undead creatures would not die as long as their soul fire was not extinguished, but living beings would die once they were attacked in their vital points, even if they had the undead aura. After all, only their aura changed. Hence, even though the nether servant's blessing potion was not an advanced potion, nor did it require many precious herbs, it wasn't very well received. Things that did not have a market demand were bound to be eliminated. Thus, soon after the nether servant's blessing potion was invented, it was completely forgotten by people. Is there really such a potion? That secret merchant was somewhat apprehensive because he had indeed never heard of such a potion, and also because the method seemed too simple to be true. Of course, if it could really allow him to enter and leave the nether sea safely, the benefits he could obtain from it would be far from what these nether pearls could compare to. Hence, despite being doubtful, the secret merchant had some hopes and was waiting for Lin Li to come up with some solid evidence. "You can give it a try," Lin Li said as he turned his hand over, and a vial of transparent potion appeared in his palm. It was the Nether Servant's Blessing Potion, which was consumed by new Death Knights of the Tower of Dusk. The Death Knights that had been consecutively summoned by the Retribution Knights were usually too weak to play any significant role at the beginning. Hence, their strength had to be improved as soon as possible. Apart from the functions that Lin Li mentioned just now, the Nether Servant's Blessing Potion could also speed up the absorption of power of death for undead creatures. It was just like a nutritional solution for the undead creatures. However, most necromancers could not obtain the allegiance of the Death Knights, while other low-level undead creatures were consumables. It would be too extravagant to nurture them with the Nether Servant's Blessing Potion. Only the Tower of Dusk would have sufficient Death Knights and could afford to use such a method. "Are you kidding? How can there be that kind of potion?" Kantori exclaimed when he saw that Lin Li had really taken out a potion. He suddenly remembered his investigation on the Tower of Dusk when he was in the Breezy Plains, which gave him an ominous feeling because he learned that the pharmaceutical business seemed to be exactly one of the mainstays of the Tower of Dusk. "Is it true?" the secret merchant wondered as he took the potion from Lin Li's hand apprehensively. However, when he saw how certain Lin Li was, he decided to give it a try so that he wouldn't really miss the opportunity to make a fortune. Of course, there was no need to really go to the Nether Sea to test it out. He simply beckoned a slave over, and then ordered him to down the Nether Servant's Blessing Potion. A slave belonged entirely to his master, so even if his master wanted him to kill himself, he would have no other choice, not to mention drinking a potion. Hence, although the slave was trembling, he nevertheless brought the potion bottle close to his mouth, and chugged it in one go before closing his eyes tightly to wait for his death. However, at this juncture, something that shocked the secret merchant and Kantori, as well as the surrounding crowd of people, happened. As the slave drank the Nether Servant's Blessing Potion, his vitality soon vanished, and was replaced by a death aura that was similar to that of undead creatures. However, the slave's appearance remained unchanged, except that there was now a faint layer of black mist around his body. "Take this." The secret merchant tried to contain his excitement as he took out a nether pearl and gave it to his slave. Nether pearls contained a pure and powerful death aura that would erode an ordinary person and turn them into an undead creature once they touched it. Hence, if that slave did not get eroded by the death aura of the nether pearl, it would mean that there was a great possibility that the potion would allow him to resist the death aura in the Nether Sea. "Die, die, die, he must die," Kantori secretly prayed in his heart while looking at the slave nervously too. He had come over to make Lin Li make a fool out of himself, not to watch Lin Li get his way. However, it seemed that he was the only one who was unlucky because he had spent 4 million gold coins on something that was of no use to him while failing to stop Lin Li from reaching his goals. The thought of the smug and complacent look Lin Li would have on his face after completing the deal with the secret merchant made him feel terrible. Apart from Kantori, that secret merchant and the other secret merchants from the several stores nearby, as well as the curious onlookers who had come over to take a look, all seemed a little nervous as they waited with bated breaths, as every one of them knew that if there was really a method to get in and out of the Nether Sea without being eroded by the death aura, they could treat the entire Nether Sea like it was their backyard. Everyone watched as the slave picked up the nether pearl from his master's hand. After nether pearl was taken out of the crystal box, everyone could see a dense black gas coalescing on its surface, as well as what seemed to be countless resentful spirits howling and struggling within. If an ordinary living being were to touch it, the black gas will immediately spread out towards their body, while the countless resentful spirits would also emerge to rip apart the soul of the living being. However, they were now presented with a scene that was simply unbelievable to them. The slave was holding the nether pearl in hand, but they didn't see what they had expected. Instead, the black gas on the nether pearl seemed to have been fixed in place as it didn't spread towards the slave at all. At the same time, the countless vengeful spirits in the black gas were also merely roaring silently when they detected the breath of living beings, not in the slightest bit interested in the slave. Now that the effect of the Nether Servant's Blessing Potion had been proven, Evrion's breathing began to quicken as they all came forward to ask Lin Li about the Nether Servant's Blessing Potion. Some even planned to cooperate with Lin Li. Although the erosion by death aura was just one of the dangers that came with the exploration of the Nether Sea, and they also had to face the risk of being threatened by the undead Sea Clan of the Nether Sea, the threat of the undead creatures of the Sea Clan took on physical form, and could be dealt with using other means. For example, they could fight the undead creatures, or avoid them if they were unable to retaliate. However, the erosion of the death aura was pervasive, and one wouldn't be able to hide from it at all, thus making it the hardest to deal with. It might be an exaggeration to say that one could access the Nether Sea freely once they had the potion, but as long as the erosion by the death aura was no longer a factor to consider, the difficulty of exploring the Nether Sea would be reduced by more than half. Under such a huge temptation, the surrounding crowd couldn't help but cave in to their desires, and all crowded around Lin Li in a bid to discuss a cooperation with him, regardless of how rich they were and how high their status was. Seeing this scene, the secret merchant began to panic as he hurriedly held up the box of nether pearls with both hands and handed it to Lin Li while saying to everyone else, "Okay, everyone, stop arguing. This is a deal between President Flick and me. Please don't affect us." "What a joke. You are offering only some nether pearls." "President Flick, as long as you cooperate with the Seven Seas Trade Union, we will provide you with as many nether pearls as you need," said a smiling pot-bellied merchant who had squeezed through the crowd. "Baidello, you've thought of such a good plan, haven't you? Everyone knows the enormous value of the things hidden in the Nether Sea, and the nether pearls are insignificant compared to that. Yet, you actually have the nerve to cooperate with President Flick on such terms." Another tall and lanky man squeezed in and rebuked Baidello disdainfully. He then put on a deferential smile and said to Lin Li, "President Flick, I'm from the Sahedern Trade Union, and I'm very sincere about cooperating with you. How about we go elsewhere to discuss the cooperation?" On the other hand, Kantori, who was waiting to see Lin Li embarrass himself, had already been pushed away by the excited crowd that was squeezing in to get closer to Lin Li. He was filled with a strong frustration and dejection. 4,000,000 gold coins were not a big deal to him, but what irked him the most was that he had been tricked by his enemy, whom he absolutely hated. That was simply unacceptable to him, but there was nothing he could do while hearing the compliments that the crowd was showering Lin Li with. In particular, Kantori was more enraged by the fact that Lin Li didn't take a single glance at him and simply treated him like he was non-existent. If he had lost after a brutal fight, he would have felt less disgruntled because he had at least caused some trouble for him. However, the fact now was that he seemed just like a clown who was creating a nuisance and getting ignored, which was a huge insult and humiliation to him. At the thought of this, Kantori found it harder and harder to curb his anger, as he even felt an urge to fall out with Lin Li. However, just when Kantori was on the verge of an outburst, Harquis had been standing next to him, pulled him back in time, and said, "That's enough, Kantori, let's get to the important matters that we have to handle, and stop wasting time here." On the one hand, Harquis did not want to see Kantori getting into trouble, since they had, after all, been friends for years. On the other hand, Harquis was also worried that he wouldn't be able to explain to his father and elders back at home if things were to go out of hand. His father and elders had instructed him to form a friendship with Lin Li, and if things got worse, he would not only fail to complete the task they gave him, he would also allow things to develop in the opposite direction. If that were to happen, he would lose his position in the Octopus clan. After being pulled back by Harquis, Kantori finally calmed down a little and kept his eyes fixed on Lin Li, who was standing among the crowd. He gritted his teeth and said, "HMPH, okay, we'll let him be smug for the time being." Hearing his words, Harquis secretly shook his head. In his opinion, Kantori was a great person, but his only flaw was his lack of foresight and broad horizons. However, if it were not for the admonishments of his father and elders, Harquis would have probably acted in a similar manner. With that thought in mind, Harquis couldn't help but look at Lin Li, still in disbelief that his attainments in inscription had actually made his father and the elders feel inferior to him. After Kantori left, Lin Li managed to get his hands on that box of nether pearls too. As for the cooperation, Lin Li did not promise anyone anything. Anyway, the nether servant's blessing potion was something that only the pharmacists of the Tower of Dusk could concoct. Hence, anyone who wanted to go to the Nether Sea would have to buy the nether servant's blessing potion from the Tower of Dusk. Lin Li never thought of cooperating with someone and monopolizing the Nether Sea through cooperation, either. Otherwise, he could have just gone to do so himself instead of seeking cooperation with others. Although the resources in the Nether Sea were very attractive, there were countless undead creatures of the Sea Clan present, and the Nether Sea was not something that two forces could monopolize. If they didn't have enough strength, they would only be able to explore the periphery of the sea instead of delving deeper. Thus, the quality and quantity of their gains would imaginably be very low. Hence, Lin Li would benefit the most if more and more forces explored the Nether Sea and discovered the resources in it for him instead of gaining monopoly. As long as the Tower of Dusk was always in control of the supply of the Nether Servant's blessing potion, the other forces would only be working for the Tower of Dusk regardless of how they tried to explore. After obtaining the nether pearls, Lin Li took Conoris and Angelano away and proceeded with browsing the items sold at each stall of the secret merchant market. However, Kantori had stopped following them. Although Lin Li had never taken Kantori seriously, He was glad to enjoy some peace and silence without Cantori's incessant clamoring. Lin Li managed to purchase those nether pearls at 10% of the original price set by the secret merchant. Of the 30 or so nether pearls, almost half of them reached the peak legendary level, which was enough to give the Retribution Knight Legion a great boost in combat power. Even a sanctuary powerhouse probably wouldn't dare to contend with a legion composed entirely of Retribution Knights, whose combat power was at the peak of the legendary level. However, that was only Lin Li's first gain in the secret merchant market, and the beginning of his shopping trip. He reckoned that there had to be many more precious items waiting to be discovered by him. As expected, Lin Li began to spend a lot of money later on, and his expenditure amounted to as much as hundreds of millions of gold coins, which he did not hesitate to pay. Lin Li bought some rare metals that contained the elemental power of water at a stall of one of the secret merchants. It could be used to help Angelano modify the alchemy colossus. They had previously bought a divine sea pillar at Gift of the Sea, which would only give the alchemy colossus the ability to fight in the sea once it was equipped. And if the parts of the alchemy colossus were replaced with some that could be compatible with the divine sea pillar, it would allow the power of the divine sea pillar to be fully exerted. The divine sea pillar contained extremely powerful rules of the sea that could allow one to mobilize the power of the ocean for his own use. If they used the divine sea pillar solely for the sake of letting the alchemy colossus fight on sea, that would be a huge waste. If the alchemy colossus could really use this power, its combat power would probably be similar to that of a sanctuary powerhouse, even though it might not be able to create a world. In particular, Lin Li still had some divinity metal. Although he could not replace all the parts and accessories of the alchemy colossus, he would be able to use the metal in some key parts of the core, which would be of great help to the alchemy colossus. Although there was nothing too striking about the divinity metal, it had the growth attribute, which other types of metals lacked. If the divinity metal was used during the transformation, the alchemy colossus might one day grow to the sanctuary realm. In addition to those rare metals with the water attribute, Lin Li also obtained many precious herbs in the market. Besides, there was another point. Due to the lack of pharmaceutics gurus in Anril and the fact that ordinary pharmacists couldn't use those precious herbs at all, the prices of precious herbs weren't ridiculously high. In fact, some were even sold at discounted prices. Due to the characteristics of the marine environment, those herbs were basically drawn to the water attribute. Actually, herbs with the water attribute were mostly used to formulate recovery potions. But there was a difference between static water and dynamic water. The elemental power of water in the sea was inclined to being in an excited state, and thus the herbs with the water attribute were the best material for formulating potions meant for improving the attack power of magic spells. Lin Li spent more than 3 hours and hundreds of millions of gold coins on the first floor of the secret merchant market. Of course, not all the deals were made using gold coins, because magical crystals were also considered valid currency that was accepted at the market. Lin Li had an abundance of magical crystals. However, just as Lin Li finished shopping on the first floor and was about to head to the second floor, he stopped in his tracks near the door leading to the second floor, because he detected an aura that seemed vaguely familiar to him. Lin Li turned his head in the direction of the familiar aura, only to see a luxuriously dressed nobleman who was fiddling with a dagger in front of the stall belonging to a secret merchant, who was wearing an eagle-headed mask just a short distance away. The aura that seemed familiar came from the dagger that the nobleman had slightly unsheathed. As he placed the dagger back in, the aura immediately disappeared without a trace. That seemed to be the reason that he didn't notice the dagger when he came over from that stall earlier on. However, despite feeling an urge to take a closer look at the dagger, Lin Li did not reveal anything in his expression, because he knew very well that when dealing with merchants, one important thing to keep in mind was to never let the merchant see how interested you might be in the goods he peddled. Otherwise, the cunning merchants would definitely take advantage of that and raise the price to more than 10 times of the original amount. Lin Li did not explain to Connorus and the others, and simply pretended to be nonchalant as he returned to the vicinity of that stall that he had just left a short while ago. While casually browsing through the items at the stall, he secretly transmitted his mental strength towards the dagger that the noble was holding. Although Connorus and Angelano were confused, they were smart and experienced enough. Hence, they did not ask Lin Li any questions, and simply followed him back to the stall. Besides, with their understanding of Lin Li, they knew that Lin Li had probably developed an interest in something. At this juncture, Lin Li had already started using his mental strength to test the dagger. However, to his surprise, the inconspicuous sheath that came with the dagger had blocked his mental strength and prevented it from penetrating it. Fortunately, the nobleman pulled the dagger out a little again, as if he could hear Lin Li's thoughts. The moment the dagger was slightly unsheathed, Lin Li immediately seized the opportunity and allowed his mental strength to touch it. However, the results of the test with the mental strength made Lin Li shocked, even though he was usually composed enough to keep his cool. The blade of the King Hunter. It turned out to be the blade of the King Hunter. Lin Li was in huge disbelief with the outcome. In the game of Endless World, he was wearing the Hunter King suit, which was definitely the top equipment in the entire game. The King Hunter's blade was one of the parts of the Hunter King set, and was ranked among the top weapons, though it was not as good as the Stars of Fury and the Debris of the Stars. How did the King Hunter's blade end up here? Lin Li suddenly recalled the Immortal King's incarnation that he had encountered in the Well of the Sun when exploring the Sky Castle. Not only was that incarnation using the Stars of Fury and the Debris of the Stars, it was also wearing the King Hunter's suit that Lin Li had once owned. However, at that time, the Debris of the Stars and the Stars of Fury were both condensed with mana by the Immortal King, as with the King Hunter's suit. That also meant that the Immortal King probably had the real King Hunter's suit. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to coincidentally create an exact replica. The appearance of the King Hunter's blade reminded Lin Li of the world in the game, and also allowed him to associate it with the Immortal King. However, Lin Li did not rush to ask about it, and instead stood a short distance away to look at the things in front of him while listening to the explanation that the secret merchant over there was giving to the customers. After hearing the explanation, Lin Li learned that the King Hunter's blade came from Cursed Island in the past. He remembered that it was mentioned in the legend of Cursed Island that Cursed Island might have been desolate in the beginning, but it hadn't been covered in ice and snow. Instead, someone found a few powerful magical equipment pieces on the island, and touched something, which resulted in the current appearance of the island. The King Hunter's blade was rumored to be one of the several pieces of magical equipment that had been dug out and eventually ended up with that secret merchant. However, the nobleman was clearly not interested in the secret merchant's words. In fact, when he heard about Cursed Island, he was so frightened that he tossed the King Hunter's blade back to the secret merchant. By the time the secret merchant wanted to say something, the nobleman fled as if he had been marred with bad luck. At this moment, Lin Li slowly walked towards the stall, and first looked at other things before turning to look at the King Hunter's blade, making it seem as casual as possible. The secret merchant with eagle head mask was a little dejected, at first because his customer had fled in fright, but when he noticed that Lin Li was also looking at the dagger, he immediately deferentially said, "Sir, what are you interested in? All the things that I have here are fine and exquisite." Lin Li did not respond to his question, and instead reached out to pick up the King Hunter's blade. However, as soon as he did, his expression turned sullen again because only half of it was left. "This is what you call a fine product?" Lin Li asked disdainfully while shaking the half of the dagger in his hand. However, the secret merchant with the eagle head mask didn't feel awkward at all as he explained, "Sir, this dagger may be broken, but its sharpness is definitely beyond your imagination. You should know how hard starry metal is, but this dagger can cut through it easily like it's a piece of fruit." While speaking, the secret merchant with the eagle head mask took the King Hunter's blade from Lin Li's hand and slashed at a piece of starry metal. Just as he said, a piece of the starry metal was slashed off by the blade, and the surface of the cut was as smooth as a mirror. However, Lin Li felt a little sad about the King Hunter's blade because it could be considered the pinnacle of human craftsmanship, and if it was further improved, it might reach the level of an artifact. Despite being one of the top 10 weapons in the past, it was now used to cut starry metal to prove its sharpness. It was undoubtedly a huge insult to the King Hunter's blade. "Okay, considering how sharp it is, I'll take this severed half of the dagger. How much are you going to charge for this?" Lin Li asked, showing a little bit of interest at the right time. If he were to spend money to buy it while seeming to be completely uninterested, he might end up arousing suspicion. After all, the cunning merchants were no fools. 6 million gold coins. "It's definitely going to be a bang for your buck," said the secret merchant with the eagle head mask when he saw that there was some hope of selling the dagger. 6 million gold coins were nothing to Lin Li, but in the eyes of others, it would be an absolutely foolish thing to spend so much money on a broken dagger. Hence, Lin Li shook his head and looked at the secret merchant with a contemptuous gaze. He then said, "Trust you to have the nerve to charge 6 million gold coins for a broken dagger. Sir, you can't say that. This dagger might be broken, but you've seen how sharp it is. Besides, this is something from Cursed Island, and all the items that came with it were sold for dozens of millions of gold coins each. I'm offering it to you at only 6 million gold coins precisely because it's broken. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would charge even higher than 60 million, let alone 6 million, the secret merchant with the eagle head mask said without the slightest tinge of shame, as if the dagger was really an artifact. "Don't tell me that it comes from Cursed Island, or wherever. That means nothing to me. If I just want to keep it as a collection piece, I'm perfectly capable of buying something even more ancient. A broken dagger is a broken dagger. Even the mageth on it is incomplete. All it has left to offer is its sharpness. The price of 6 million is too absurd. It seems like you don't intend to sell it. After saying that, Lin Li used a very common but also very effective bargaining tactic by turning around and pretending to leave. If a merchant was confident in the value of his goods, he wouldn't be afraid of such a playing hard to get trick when faced with such a situation. However, the secret merchant with the eagle-headed mask, who obviously did not have much confidence in the broken dagger himself, quickly exclaimed, "How much are you planning to offer?" Then, Lin Li's words were not an exaggeration. In fact, it was true to a certain extent. The most important thing about a magical weapon was the array formation, or the mageth on it. However, there was no way the mageth on a broken dagger would be complete, and an incomplete dagger wouldn't be able to exert much power. In that case, what else could it do except be sharp? Of course, except for Lin Li himself, no one would know the reason that the King Hunter's blade became the King Hunter's blade, precisely because the mageth that really determined its power was not on the flat side of the blade, but on its cross-section. It was akin to a stack of countless pieces of paper. Hence, even if the middle was broken off, but there were still countless intact mageths on the remaining part, the power would still be reduced by a small margin. After the secret merchant with the eagle mask called out to him, Lin Li turned around and nonchalantly said, "Its sharpness and its origin are worth only 1 million gold coins. That's my final price. Any more, and we don't have to discuss it further." Although 1 million gold coins were not considered much for the secret merchants, who were able to set up a stall in this market, there were obvious defect on the dagger, and the secret merchant would still be making a huge profit from selling a piece of garbage. As such, for 1 million gold coins, 1 million gold coins is too little. I spent more than 1 million gold coins to get this dagger. As soon as the secret merchant tried to raise the price by a little bit, he saw Lin Li turning around to leave without hesitating again. He frantically said, "Fine, fine, 1 million gold coins it is." After paying 1 million gold coins, Lin Li finally got the King Hunter's blade that had once belonged to him. In fact, he was now a mage, and thus even a complete King Hunter's blade would be of no use to him, let alone a broken one. However, he didn't buy the King Hunter's blade for himself, but for Norfaller. The weapon that Norfaller had been using all along, and still presently, was the Heaven's Wrath dagger pair that Lin Li had purchased from the Time Consignment store back then. The Heaven's Wrath dagger was indeed a good weapon, especially after it was embellished with the Gem of Curse. However, it was only considered good for legendary powerhouses. Now that Norfaller had become a sanctuary powerhouse, the Heaven's Wrath dagger seemed to be inadequate for his current strength. On the other hand, the King Hunter's blade might have been broken, but its power was much stronger than that of the Heaven's Wrath dagger. With Norfaller's sanctuary level strength and the King Hunter's blade, his combat power would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Another impressive trait about the King Hunter's blade was that it had an inconspicuous sheath that could completely shield the power fluctuations of the dagger, making it the most suitable weapon for assassins. After obtaining the King Hunter's blade, Lin Li couldn't help but realize an astonishing fact that he had discovered in regard to the underground world of Cursed Island. The fact that even such a powerful weapon as the King Hunter's blade had been broken showed that the battle between the immortal king and the ancient god of light must have been intense and groundbreaking back then. Unfortunately, he had now only acquired the King Hunter's blade. If he could find the complete King Hunter's suit and equip Norfaller with it, Norfaller's strength might soar high enough for him to defeat a sanctuary powerhouse easily with no issue. Though it was broken, the value of the King Hunter's blade was actually no less than that of the nether pearls in Lin Li's opinion. Lin Li was definitely capable of picking the nether pearls himself, but he just didn't want to waste time doing so. However, there was only one King Hunter's blade in the entire Anral. Of course, the King Hunter's blade represented the pinnacle of human craftsmanship. After all, if Lin Li could one day reach the peak of the guru level in all relevant fields, he might just be able to create a weapon on par with the King Hunter's blade. However, that would likewise require some time. Now, he had become a guru of inscription, and even comprehended a tinge of the secrets of the divine smith level, but the creation of a weapon like the King Hunter's blade required more than just inscriptions. After getting the King Hunter's blade, Lin Li took a closer look at the cross-section, and became more and more certain of his previous conjectures. The Immortal King's main weapon was not the King Hunter's blade, but the Stars of Fury and the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars. Even Lin Li himself had almost eliminated the King Hunter's blade, and brought it with him just to enhance the attributes of his suit back when he obtained the Stars of Fury and the debris of the stars in the game. The King Hunter's blade was inferior to the Stars of Fury, but it was still the representative piece of the pinnacle of human craftsmanship. Yet, it was broken in that great battle. The impact that broke it was probably powerful enough to annihilate any sanctuary powerhouse in an instant. When the immortal king killed the dragon of destruction, he didn't use the King Hunter's blade, but the King Hunter's blade was actually broken during the battle with the ancient god of light later on. Clearly, the immortal king didn't have an easy victory, either. Fortunately, I didn't release the ancient god of light back then. When thinking in retrospect, Lin Li felt a little fearful as he imagined how terrible things would have been if the ancient god of light had been released. At that time, he and the members of the Illuminati had absolutely no means to lay a finger on the ancient god of light at all. Not to mention the debris of the stars. Even if he had had the stars of fury, he still wouldn't have been able to resist at all. As of now, Lin Li was very satisfied with his purchases from the secret merchant market, and he wouldn't have a single regret even if he left now. Moreover, this was only the first level of the secret merchant market, and it was said that the truly superior items were found only on the second floor. However, it was impossible for Lin Li to bargain much on the second floor, as what he had done on the first, because the prices of the items on the second floor were definitely not going to be too far off from their value. Of course, if he really chanced upon something that would be useful again, Lin Li wouldn't mind paying more money to buy it. He wasn't a miser, and he believed in the logic that the value of money existed only when it was spent. If he were to never spend it at all, money would be nothing but garbage. Lin Li soon arrived at the second floor of the cabin together with Connorus and Angelano. The hall of the second floor was obviously much more luxuriously decorated than the first floor, with red and gold velvet carpet laid over the ground and gilded walls. Although the space on the second floor was much smaller, there were very few senior secret merchants, so it seemed to be more spacious. The sales method on this floor was similar to that on the first floor, but there was basically a clear price tag on every good, with detailed descriptions as well as some documents of proof of authenticity that were issued by the Secret Merchants Alliance. There were basically no counterfeit or inferior goods on this floor, but the prices were indeed exorbitant. After browsing through a few stalls, Lin Li already had a rough understanding of the quality of the goods on this floor. He couldn't help but be amazed by the tricks and tactics of the senior secret merchants. They were truly very resourceful, as each item that they sold was of great value. At the first stall that Lin Li went to on the second floor, he right away saw an egg of a blue dragon, which was still alive and about to hatch. Like the crimson dragon, the blue dragon was a descendant of the ancient Wyrms. The crimson dragon was the descendant of the flame dragon, while the blue dragon was a descendant of the ice blast Wyrm that held the powerful nomological power of the water element. The strength of adult blue dragons could reach the peak of the legendary level, which was far more powerful than the green dragon king that Lin Li had met. However, adult blue dragons were very arrogant and would never become subordinates of other creatures. Even high elves could not quite tame adult Wyrms back then. However, if someone could hatch an egg of a Wyrm and raise it to adulthood while taming it in the process, they would be able to gain the Wyrm's approval and become a powerful and rare dragon knight. Clearly, a Wyrm's egg was even more precious than an adult Wyrm. For ordinary people, hatching and taming a dragon while raising it to adulthood was by no means a simple task, not to mention the limitations due to the lifespan of humans, which was generally lower than that of the Wyrms. The costs of raising and nurturing a Wyrm alone were already staggering. The food consumption of a Wyrm alone was enough to make a medium-sized force go bankrupt, yet keeping a Wyrm fed was just one of the many conditions needed to provide the Wyrm with the best environment for growth. However, those who could enter this place were naturally wealthy, and many of them had legendary level strength. Hence, it wasn't impossible to nurture and raise a Wyrm, and thus the dragon egg was soon bought by a noble sword sage at a price of 10 million gold coins. Dragon eggs were not considered remarkable items at the secret merchant market, because there were many other similar creatures like the eggs and hatchlings of marine magical beasts. For example, the hatchling of the nine-headed sea serpent was not inferior to the egg of the Wyrm, and upon reaching adulthood, it would definitely be a hegemon of the sea that was even stronger than a Wyrm. In addition to the eggs and hatchlings of marine magical beasts, there were also adult marine magical beasts for sale at the market. However, they were usually enormous, and thus could not be put on display at the market. The cargo ships around the mermaid contained large goods like those marine beasts. After completing a deal in the market, the Secret Merchants Alliance would step in to help complete the handover of the goods. Adult marine magical beasts usually could not be compared to Wyrms, so they were less difficult to tame. Of course, it would basically be impossible to turn a domesticated marine magical beast into a combat partner. It could only become a powerful tool. However, for the average person, having a powerful marine magical beast in the endless ocean was enough support. For example, if a sea caravan could have a powerful marine magical beast to act as an escort during their voyage, they would be able to deter and prevent harassment by pirates. An adult legendary level marine magical beast was a terrifying existence at sea, and it would be a piece of cake for it to annihilate a band of pirates. Of course, if a band of pirates likewise had a marine magical beast, it would be much simpler for them to hijack the caravans at sea. However, be it a weird egg or a marine magical beast, they were basically of little use to Lin Li because he wasn't short of legendary level combat power. In a sanctuary level battle, legendary level combat power would not make much of a difference unless they were on a scale that was as large as the Retribution Knight Legion. Besides, Lin Li owned a crimson humorous Wyrm that was just as powerful as an adult Wyrm. Thus, there was no need for him to waste his time and resources on raising a baby Wyrm or a marine magical beast. In addition to those living creatures, the secret merchants also had many carcasses of prehistoric marine magical beasts. During the prehistoric times, the prehistoric magical beasts dominated Anral, and many terrifying prehistoric marine magical beasts lived in the endless ocean. Their individual strength was sometimes even more powerful than the ancient Wyrms. One of the senior secret merchants was selling the eyeball of a giant prehistoric barbarous whale, which was even taller than a human, and looked like it was carved out of a whole sapphire, as it emitted a formidable aura. The might that came with it was not inferior to a sanctuary powerhouse's, and it was similarly very powerful too. In the prehistoric times, the prehistoric barbarous whales were the overlords of the endless ocean, as they could turn the entire ocean into a domain world that was difficult for those at the sanctuary realm to break through. However, the power of the prehistoric barbarous whales and their mastery of the world laws were similarly derived from magical crystals, just like those of other prehistoric magical beasts. Hence, although the eyeball seemed powerful, and even contained mana that was not inferior to a sanctuary-level magical crystals, that was all it had to offer. If the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale was sold on the first floor of the market, it would definitely have an exorbitant price tag. However, due to the constraints of the secret merchant alliance, the price of the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale was controlled to a certain extent, and wasn't too flabbergasting. That wasn't all. The secret merchant even gave a clear and thorough explanation of the uses of the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale. One was that it would help with taming marine magical beasts because the prehistoric barbarous whale could suppress the marine magical beasts of the endless ocean with its aura. Another was that the eye could be used as a sanctuary-level magical crystal that would act as a mana source. However, compared to sanctuary-level magical crystals, the mana here would not be restored automatically. Hence, although the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale looked rather overwhelming, very few people asked about it. They would at most take a few glances and then turn around to go elsewhere after listening to the introduction. However, Lin Li was a little interested in the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale, and decided to acquire it after seeing that the price was rather reasonable. The eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale was quite useful to Lin Li as it could be used as a powerful weapon for the star. Lin Li had read some information about the prehistoric magical beasts of the endless ocean when he was on the star which was left behind by Garesco. Hence, he also knew some things that others might not be aware of. Although the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale was not a magical crystal, and did not contain powerful magic laws by nature, it was still a very powerful weapon of the prehistoric barbarous whale. It was said that the largest prehistoric barbarous whale had a size that was equivalent to hundreds of Wyrms, and it definitely wouldn't be flexible enough to fight with other enemies using its body. Hence, one of the most powerful weapons that the prehistoric barbarous whale had was its gigantic mouth that looked like it was large enough to devour the world, which would allow it to suck ancient Wyrms from the sky and swallow the magical beasts of the ocean together with a massive amount of seawater. Another powerful weapon would be its pair of eyes that emitted light that had the ability to turn everything into the power of water. Even an ancient Wyrm would not be able to resist it. Of course, that secret merchant might not be unaware of these traits. However, it was just the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale, and not a living whale. Thus, it wouldn't be able to exert that terrifying power. However, Lin Li was different. With his peak guru level attainments and inscription, he was completely confident of stimulating the power of the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale using mageths. Of course, it was only going to be an additional weapon to the star, and in fact, it wasn't considered a remarkable item compared to the nether pearls and the king hunter's blade. After putting the eye of the prehistoric barbarous whale into the ring of endless storm, Lin Li continued to search for the things he needed in the market. Unfortunately, he no longer found anything suitable for his needs, even though the items he saw later could be considered rare treasures. For example, There were magical items of the High Elves from the Dark Age, sacrificial objects of the Sea Clan from tens of thousands of years ago, the burial objects of a certain great monarch of the Sea Clan, and many others. The power of those items might be great, but they were far inferior compared to the debris of the stars that Lin Li had. Even if he acquired them, there was nothing he could use them for. On the other hand, the important combat powers like Connor's Eternal Frostblade, Angelano's Alchemy Colossus, Ufalusis Ice Phoenix Corpse, and Norfler's Broken King Hunter's Blade did not need any magical weapons. Thus, those items would not give their power and abilities a significant boost, and buying them would be a waste. As for the mages of the Tower of Dusk, they relied on the magic net array that Garesco had left behind. The individual or combined combat strength of a few people would only affect the operation of the magic net array. The most suitable thing for them would be the magical equipment that Lin Li had designed and created himself, not the items with pompous legendary backgrounds. Hence, after turning around and casually buying a few more things that were not of great use, Lin Li no longer felt like shopping anymore. However, just as Lin Li was about to return, he stopped in front of a senior secret merchant's stall which basically didn't have any treasures up for sale. There was only some written information, which Lin Li took a closer look at, only to realize that this secret merchant was a slaver. Although Lin Li came from another world where everyone was claimed to be equal, he never thought he had the ability and obligation to make changes to the system in Anril. The system's existence was justified. Anril was a world of survival of the fittest. Even the immortal king probably wouldn't be able to change the system of Anril, let alone Lin Li. Besides, the development of the Tower of Dusk required manpower in addition to a large amount of wealth and financial power. Although the Tower of Dusk could recruit a large number of people from the breezy plains, some people might not be competent enough to make the cut even if they were willing to do it, while some who were competent weren't willing to. In that case, he would have to rely on slaves. Of course, the slaves had to have strength that was at least level 10, otherwise they would not be of any use at all. Slaves that could be sold in this upscale secret merchant market were definitely of a better grade than those outside. Otherwise, the Secret Merchants Alliance would never have arranged for the slaver to be there. Having figured that out, Lin Li picked up the information at the stall and began reading it as he intended to purchase a batch of slaves for the Tower of Dusk. After all, a large amount of manpower was still required for the transformation of the Sky Castle. Although the slaves for sale at this stall were of a variety of races, they could generally be classified into two categories, one for entertainment purposes, and the other to provide powerful support. The slaves belonging to the first category were basically handsome and beautiful or gifted, while those of the other were extremely competent. There were even some who were at the legendary level. Such strong and capable slaves were either used for gladiatorial performances, or used as guards and escorts. Some were even used as cannon fodder during explorations. In short, they were meant for practical use. Lin Li flipped through those introductions, and finally stopped at the introduction of a batch of slaves of the Seahorse clan after he had gone through several entries. It was said that the seahorses used to be the hegemons of the sea that resided in the Sea of Abundance, which was the current Nether Sea. At that time, the seahorses were so powerful that even the current 7 overlords of the ocean would have to bow down to them. The most powerful force of the Seahorse clan was the Seahorse Knights. Although they were not known for their strength, they could perfectly fuse magic and combat together into one. They could also be called the Magic Knights of the Sea. Hence, as opposed to the High Elves, the Seahorse clan used to be called the Perfect Clan of the Sea, as their ability to combine magic and combat allowed them to possess power that was greater than the famous Giant Shark Knights. The battle formations that they got into were invincible in the Endless Ocean. The High Elves conquered Anril, and even the Endless Sea, but not the Endless Ocean. Legend had it that the Seahorse clan was a large part of the reason for their failure to do so. Without the powerful Seahorse Knights, the High Elves might have extended their dominance into the Endless Ocean, and put the sea clans under their rule as they had done to those on land. However, even until now, no one knew what had happened to the Seahorse clan that caused them to lose all their glory despite having been overlords of the ocean. According to the later propaganda of the 7 other overlords, the sea god was angered by the Seahorse clan, and thus took everything away from them, though no one knew the real reason for that. The fall of the Seahorse clan was the very reason that the 7 other overlords could escape suppression and rise. In order to vie for the wealth of the Seahorse clan and the status of the ruler, they began a great war at sea. During that war, each sea clan suffered considerable losses, but the ones who ended up in the most tragic state were still the Seahorses. Not only had they lost their place in the Sea of Abundance, they even had to face the oppression of various sea clans. The rest at least still had some allies, but the Seahorse clan had become the public enemy of all the sea clans. Even after the end of the Great War, the Seahorse clan still couldn't recover and recuperate like the others. Instead, they had to remain stranded and lead miserable lives. Without their own sea, the Seahorse clan had no choice but to split up and wander around in the endless ocean. Once others found out about their temporary residence, the other sea clans would come to besiege them immediately. The Seahorse slaves that Lin Li had developed an interest in had probably ended up in the hands of the secret merchant, because they had unfortunately had their temporary residence discovered. Even till now, there was no clear explanation for the Seahorse clan's loss of power, and Lin Li merely knew that the Seahorse clan had very few powerhouses that could break through the legendary realm. If a seahorse couldn't break through the legendary realm, they would not be able to become a seahorse knight, and thus their value would be reduced greatly. Logically speaking, a batch of seahorse slaves with no potential for future development would not be of much use to Lin Li. Be it Lin Li or the Tower of Dusk, they did not lack such a force, and they probably weren't even qualified to be cannon fodder. They couldn't stay on land for long, and had to be in the sea most of the time, so it couldn't quite use them for hard labor. Hence, they were probably worse than ordinary people. However, when Lin Li thought about the Seahorse Knights that had dominated the four seas according to the legends, he couldn't help but be tempted. Just because others didn't have the means to help them break through to the legendary realm didn't mean that Lin Li didn't. Even though he did not have an exact solution now, he had plenty of resources, like the Tree of Eternity and Garesco's relics. It was possible for him to find a solution. Lin Li took another close look at that introduction to see that there were more than 60 members of the Seahorse clan, among which the old, weak, and sick had been eliminated, leaving only the strong and young ones. In terms of strength, they were definitely not far off from what the legends claimed, with the strongest being only level 19, and the weakest being only level 15. However, even if they couldn't break through the legendary realm, they should be able to serve as sailors on the star. At least he wouldn't be buying a bunch of garbage. Are these seahorse slaves also on the cargo ship outside? Lin Li asked as he picked up the document containing their information. Yes, sir, you've got impeccable judgment. The Seahorse clan has quite a balanced development among the many sea clans, as they are good at both combat and magic. It would be perfect to use them as escorts, the senior secret merchant immediately introduced to Lin Li passionately. However, Lin Li secretly sneered when he heard that, in this day and age, the so-called balanced practice of martial arts and magic was just a trap because balance meant mediocrity. If the Seahorse clan couldn't break through to the legendary realm, they wouldn't be considered jacks of all trades, but rather they would be considered lacking in every aspect. Anyone who used the Seahorse slaves as escorts would definitely be putting their lives in danger. Although the prices of the items here were fixed and stated clearly, there was still some room for bargaining. Lin Li immediately voiced his opinions, and harped on that point to reduce the price by 20%. The Seahorse clan didn't fit the aesthetic standards of ordinary humans, because they had long faces and long necks, matched with lanky, bamboo-like bodies. Their skin was dark blue and covered with green spots, causing their strength to be the only trait that they could leverage on. However, everyone knew that the Seahorse clan would never break through to the legendary realm, and while their strength might seem impressive to ordinary people, they weren't considered much to those who could enter this place. In fact, the most important reason that this senior secret merchant could bring the Seahorse slaves over to the market and put them on sale was that it was not easy to nab some Seahorse clan members. It was unknown if it was because they were on the brink of extinction, or because they had all hidden somewhere, but all in all, they were scarce and rare. Hence, after some bargaining, Lin Li bought those 60-odd Seahorse slaves at a 20% discount. After buying those Seahorse slaves, Lin Li didn't bother to continue wasting time shopping around, and instead requested the secret merchant to go out with him for the handover of the slaves. Soon, under the arrangement of the secret merchant alliance, they arrived at a cargo ship outside the Mermaid, and more than 60 female and male Seahorse slaves, who were tied together by ropes, were urged out of the cabin of the cargo ship by a few masked men. Lin Li sized them up using his mental strength, and discovered that their physiques were not too bad, which showed that the slave sellers didn't mistreat them because they were to be sold at the secret merchant market. The three strongest Seahorse slaves had just reached level 19, while the ordinary ones were only at level 16 or level 17. The weakest one was only at level 15, perhaps because he was too young. After Lin Li finished inspecting the slaves, the handover was completed. Next, Lin Li brought the slaves, who had already resigned themselves to fate, onto another ship provided by the Secret Merchants Alliance, and set off to Helena Port. Since the star was docked at Helena Harbor, Lin Li immediately arranged for the Seahorse slaves to board the star. Although the strength of the Seahorse slaves was no weaker than that of the sailors on the star, he wouldn't have to worry about them escaping, because he had the slave contract with the sole brand of the slaves in hand. After instructing the sailors on the star to show the seahorse slaves around to familiarize themselves with the star, he left to return to the capital of the Gilded Kingdom together with Conorus and Angelano. What? It's already been sold. The secret merchant market was originally quite quiet, especially since the guests on the second floor were wealthy and noble figures who made sure to remain polite and maintain the gentlemanliness of nobles even when bargaining. However, the sudden roar of fury was like a bolt of thunder that broke the silence and attracted the attention of everyone. In the hall of the second floor, there were several luxuriously dressed nobles standing in front of the stall of the secret merchant, who just sold the seahorse slaves. The person who yelled was the one standing in front. Those nobles were all at least 2 meters tall and above, looking rather strong and muscular, but the skin they exposed was silvery white. Their beady eyes were flickering with a shocking light, and their mouths were so large that they seemed to be reaching their necks. There were also gills on both sides of their necks, opening and closing slightly. Even a random commoner of the Gilded Kingdom would be able to tell these ferocious and bizarre-looking people were from the Giant Shark clan, one of the 7 overlords of the Endless Ocean. What more the other guests that were present? Besides, the people in the hall also recognized at once that their leader was the young monarch of the Giant Shark clan, Grina. The Giant Shark clan was in control of the largest sea area in the Endless Ocean and the richest marine resources, especially since they had the largest slice of the pie after the Great War in the ocean back then, and obtained countless benefits. Among the 7 overlords of the Endless Ocean, the Giant Shark clan was definitely the strongest, as they even had the potential to become the ruler of the Endless Ocean at one point. However, the strength of the Giant Shark clan did not reach the point where it could subdue all the other clans in the sea in the end. After several large-scale battles, they still failed to conquer the seas in the face of the joint resistance of several sea clans. However, the Giant Shark clan managed to stop in time, as they were able to achieve a deterrent effect on the other clans, despite having suffered large losses too. No one knew how strong the Giant Shark clan had become, but one thing was for sure: it was definitely stronger than it had been before the Great War. After so many years of rest and recuperation, coupled with the digestion and absorption of the spoils they'd reaped from the war, even the other sea clans had already developed to an unprecedented extent, not to mention the Giant Shark clan. If the Giant Shark clan could not reach the level that they used to be at, they wouldn't be qualified to be one of the 7 overlords. Hence, after seeing that the person who clamored turned out to be Grina, the junior monarch of the Giant Shark clan, the nobles and bigwigs of the other clans looked away in unison. Everyone knew that the Giant Shark clan was notorious for being unreasonable. Even if they stared at Grina for a little longer than they should, they might arouse his displeasure, let alone if they confronted him. Faced with the junior monarch of the Giant Shark clan, the senior secret merchant secretly wiped some sweat off his forehead, and couldn't help but be secretly thankful that he had sold the seahorse slaves away before the nobles arrived. Otherwise, they might shortchange him to the point of paying lower than the cost price. Although the secret merchants' alliance were prestigious and esteemed in the Endless Ocean, and claimed to guarantee fair transactions in the market, there was never absolute fairness in this world. Even the secret merchants' alliance would not really go against an overlord like the Giant Shark clan for the sake of a secret merchant. Anyone would know whom to choose between the young monarch of the Giant Shark clan and a senior secret merchant. Facing Grina, the junior monarch of the Giant Shark clan, the senior secret merchant couldn't help but behave respectfully even though he had a mask on. He said, "Dear honored guest, the 67 seahorse slaves you mentioned have indeed, very unfortunately, been sold to someone else." After receiving the confirmation, Grina couldn't help but secretly clench his fists, but he nevertheless suppressed the anger within him. No matter what, the secret merchant's alliance was still somewhat authoritative. If he were elsewhere, he wouldn't care about whether he was being reasonable or not, and would simply punish the secret merchant for causing him to make a wasted trip. At this point, a Giant Shark clan member, who stood beside Grina, asked the secret merchant another question on Grina's behalf, perhaps because he was afraid that Grina might lose his temper. "Let me ask you, who bought those seahorse slaves? I believe that people who can come here are definitely not ignorant. You should know who he is, shouldn't you?" Those who were able to become secret merchants, especially those at the senior level, naturally had their own sources of information. Besides, Lin Li had already done 2 groundbreaking things despite having only been to the Gilded Kingdom for a short period of time. It would be strange if the secret merchant didn't know who he was. Anyway, the slaves had already been sold, so there was naturally no need for the secret merchant to continue keeping Lin Li's identity confidential. Hence, he hurriedly said, "Yes, the person who bought those seahorse slaves was President Flick of the Tower of Dusk from the Breezy Plains." Tower of Dusk from the Breezy Plains. Perhaps because he had just arrived in Gilded Kingdom, the name Flick did not ring a bell to Grina. After all, Among the many forces of the endless ocean, there had never been one named the Tower of Dusk. Seeing this, the secret merchant quickly continued to explain without waiting for Grina to question him further. Yes, they were invited by the Gilded Kingdom to attend the founding celebration this year. Soon after they arrived, they got into quite a huge conflict with the Gilded Kingdom. Afterwards, the secret merchant briefly told Grina and the others about the two incidents that happened between the Gilded Kingdom and the Tower of Dusk. Those two incidents were actually not that complicated, and the Tower of Dusk had simply embarrassed the Gilded Kingdom. However, for some reason, the Gilded Kingdom had been tolerating them time and time again. HMPH, Bradler is really such a degenerate. That's just how the humans are. They're so wishy-washy about everything. After hearing that, Grina immediately showed extreme contempt and disdain. He didn't think that the Tower of Dusk, which he had never heard of, really had any impeccable strength and power. He reckoned that Bradler had to have just been worried about ruining the founding celebration. Actually, it wasn't strange that Grina would have such thoughts, and he definitely wasn't the only one who did. The Gilded Kingdom was a human kingdom that held significant power in the endless ocean, while the Tower of Dusk was a small, nameless force from the breezy plains. Anyone in the right state of mind would be able to tell which one was stronger. In fact, only a few people were aware of the real reason, something even some of the ministers of the Gilded Kingdom did not know of. Even with this senior secret merchant's sources of information, he wouldn't be able to find out more. Thus, what he told Grina was just some commonly known facts. Hearing that the one who bought the seahorse slaves was just the president of a small nameless force, one of Grina's subordinates, who was beside him, stepped forth and said, "Junior Monarch, since those seahorse slaves have just been sold, they couldn't have gone that far. Do you want me to take some people with me and chase after them to bring the seahorse slaves back? No hurry. Now that we know who they are, why would we still need to worry about them running away?" Although Grina was a little peeved, he was not in a hurry at this time. For him, knowing whom the seahorse slaves had been sold to was enough, not to mention a small and nameless force. Even if the seahorse slaves were now in the hands of the Gilded Kingdom, Grina was confident that all it would take for him to gain ownership of the seahorse slaves was a word from him. In Grina's opinion, the seahorse slaves could basically be considered theirs as long as they did not fall into the hands of the rivals of the giant shark clan. Hence, he wasn't in a hurry anymore, and simply started shopping casually with his subordinates in the secret merchant market in a bid to pick up some things he liked along the way. At this point, Lin Li and the others had already returned to the embassy of the Tower of Dusk. The first thing Lin Li did was to give the broken King Hunter's blade to the vampire Norfaller, and told him how to use it. The King Hunter's blade was the pinnacle of human craftsmanship, and even though it was broken, it was still a very powerful magic weapon. However, it was strange that no one asked about it in the secret merchant market, especially since it was marketed as an item with a rich history and incredible sharpness. In fact, it was precisely because there was a special method to use and activate the power of the King Hunter's blade that not just anyone could use it. In Anral, Lin Li was probably the only person who knew of the method other than the immortal king. The dagger was shrouded in a layer of faint silver light with rays of subtle blade light several meters long darting out. However, there wasn't a single mana fluctuation in the light. If one didn't look at it, it would easily go unnoticed. In the in-game world, the King Hunter's blade might have been the professional weapon of hunters, but there wasn't much of a difference between hunters and assassins. The only difference was in their targets. Most of the time, the sensitivity of magical beasts to danger was actually much higher than that of humans. Hence, the King Hunter's blade's ability to conceal its aura was very useful for assassins as well. Of course, hiding aura was only one of the abilities of the King Hunter's blade, and the truly powerful aspect of the King Hunter's blade was its power. After the Heaven's Wrath daggers that Norfaller originally used were embellished with the gems of curse, they became extremely powerful magical weapons. However, Norfaller was now already a sanctuary powerhouse, yet his power seemed a little insufficient in a sanctuary-level battle. The King Hunter's blade was named after the King Hunter, and was known to be capable of killing all the magical beasts in this world. Although it was quite an exaggeration, its power was definitely not ordinary. The in-game world was almost the same as Anral, and there were also many powerful magical beasts, in addition to just some tigers and lions. Even the Wyrms, which were famous for their defense, would have their scales slit open easily like paper by the King Hunter's blade. With Norfaller's sanctuary-level power, the King Hunter's blade would definitely exert its maximum power, and even the domain worlds of ordinary sanctuary powerhouses would not be able to resist it. After letting Norfaller get familiar with the King Hunter's blade, Lin Li didn't idle about as he quickly chanted an incantation to open the spatial rift leading to the Sky Castle, and stepped in. Upon returning to the Sky Castle, Lin Li gave the nether pearls that he obtained to his subordinates, who were in charge of creating the magical weapons, and instructed them to create new weapons for the Retribution Knights. In addition, Lin Li arranged for Wilkinson and the others, who were responsible for concocting potions, to increase the number of Nether Servants' blessing potions by a small amount. He was certain that the matter in the secret merchant market would soon spread, and when the time came, there would definitely be many people coming to the Tower of Dusk to buy the Nether Servants' blessing potions. However, that which was rare was dear, even though the costs of producing the Nether Servants' blessing potions were very small. Lin Li wouldn't really open the floodgates and produce them in bulk, because he obviously had to exploit the merchants. By the time Lin Li returned to the Gilded Kingdom again, it was already dawn. However, just as he stepped out of the spatial rift, he heard some noises, and reckoned that there seemed to be a commotion. Doric, the deputy head of the Mage Legion, was waiting in the outer room of the room. Lin Li walked out from the inner room, and saw Doric, who had waited for a long time, and was sorting out the things that they bought from the secret merchant market. While walking, he asked Doric, "What's up with all the noise outside?" Doric, who was still looking a bit anxious, was visibly relieved to see that Lin Li had returned. He heaved a sigh of relief, and immediately went forward to bow to him. He said, "President, you're back. There are a few Giant Shark Clan members outside, who are demanding that you hand over the seahorse slaves you bought last night." Based on the way they addressed the person leading them, he should be the junior monarch of the Giant Shark Clan. Hand it over to them. When Lin Li heard this, he couldn't help but sneer. Regardless of whether the seahorse slaves were of any use to him, he wouldn't hand them over without rhyme or reason. The Giant Shark Clan was prestigious in the endless ocean, and was vaguely the leader of the hegemons of the sea. However, they were far from being able to frighten him. At this moment, another mage from the Mage Legion came outside the door, and asked Deputy Head Doric, "Has the president not returned yet? Those Giant Shark Clan members outside say that if you still don't appear, they will barge in themselves. Connorus and Lord Norfaller are still stopping them. Just tell Connorus and Norfaller to send them away without any concerns." Lin Li instructed Doric, and continued to sort the things, not wanting to bother wasting time on the members of the Giant Shark Clan. At this point, Connorus and Norfaller were standing at the entrance of the embassy, together with Doric, who had just come over, and the mages of the Tower of Dusk's Mage Legion. There was a bunch of aggressive Giant Shark Clan members in front of them, and their appearance was almost identical to sharks. Fortunately, the Giant Shark Clan members were clearly of distinct classes, which allowed others to tell them apart. Apart from some guards, there were 5 Giant Shark Clan members, who seemed to have supreme status, and one of those 5 was dressed nobly. The 5 people were led by the junior monarch of the Giant Shark Clan, whose strength was already at the peak of the legendary level. With the inherent divine power of the Giant Shark Clan, even ordinary sanctuary powerhouses might not be able to defeat him. On the other hand, the other 4 people were extremely famous in the Endless Ocean too, as they were known as the 4 Divine Generals, whose strength was above the legendary realm. The Giant Shark Clan was not entirely trying to show off their power by kicking up such a big fuss, though it was one of the reasons. Rather, they just wanted to ensure the safety of the prince, Grina. The Giant Shark Clan managed to rise to their current position and status entirely because of their combat power, and it wouldn't be wrong to say that they had enemies everywhere. If someone knew that the prince of the Giant Shark Clan ended up alone, they might launch an assault against the Giant Shark Clan, especially since the Gilded Kingdom was so far away from the turf of the Giant Shark Clan. If there was a mishap, they wouldn't be able to receive aid in time. "Hurry up and get your president to come out. How dare he let our prince wait for such a long time? Does he really think he's a big shot?" said one of the guards beside Grina. Although he was just a guard, he was nonetheless snobby and arrogant, completely disregarding the people of the Tower of Dusk. At this juncture, Doric walked out and said, "I'm sorry, but our president doesn't have time to see you." What? The people of the Giant Shark Clan were all stunned, not daring to believe what they had just heard. Grina was the prince of the Giant Shark Clan, whom even King Bradler of the Gilded Kingdom had to treat with great respect when summoned by Grina. Yet, the president of the Tower of Dusk, which was just a small force of the breezy plains, actually refused to meet Grina. After recovering from the shock and processing what the other party said, Grina flew into a rage and even began to tremble. As the prince of the Giant Shark Clan, he had never suffered such mistreatment before. It was simply a huge insult to him. He came here only with the intention of buying some seahorse slaves, and he also felt that the Tower of Dusk, which was just a small force, would never turn him down. However, he didn't expect that he wouldn't get a chance to meet Lin Li at all. "President Fulik has really piqued my curiosity further. I will see who he really is. How dare he disrespect the Giant Shark Clan like that?" Grina couldn't contain his anger any longer, and after saying those words through clenched teeth, he signaled for his subordinates to charge into the embassy. Grina had 4 sanctuary powerhouses with him. In his opinion, The Tower of Dusk was just like a nobody. If it were the palace of the other 6 major sea clans, or the embassy of a human kingdom, he might still have some concerns. However, he felt that the Tower of Dusk was just a minor force from the breezy plains that they could easily barge into. However, when the people of the giant shark clan were about to attack, Norfaller, who was standing in front of the embassy, suddenly disappeared without a trace. Afterwards, the entire space was shrouded in a faint layer of sanguine fog, while the people of the giant shark clan unanimously felt that they were being watched closely by something with a killing intent. At this moment, even the 4 divine generals of the giant shark clan, who were at the sanctuary realm, couldn't help but tense up and feel a little scared. They even felt that they would face a fatal blow if they took another step forward. Even a sanctuary powerhouse wouldn't be spared from what was awaiting them. They never thought that the Tower of Dusk actually had a sanctuary-level assassin. Very few assassins could reach the sanctuary realm, but those who could would definitely be terrifying, nightmarish existences. Assassins who had reached the sanctuary realm had the ability to fuse themselves with the world laws, and even fellow sanctuary-level assassins would not be able to detect their presence easily. They could be considered impossible to defend against. In particular, a more terrifying thing was that Norfaller, the sanctuary-level assassin, was also a sanctuary-level vampire, the likes of whom Grina had never seen before. Unlike ordinary assassins, Norfaller was a vampire who was a master of dark magic. The combination of dark magic and an assassin would be a great threat to almost any kind of profession, which was the reason that people often said that vampires were natural-born assassins. With Norfaller's action, the people of Giant Shark Clan suddenly seemed to have frozen in place, while the 4 divine generals immediately protected Grina anxiously. They knew that even they might not be able to avoid the assassination of a sanctuary-level vampire, let alone Grina, who was only at the peak of the legendary level. Anyone who dares to take a step closer will die. An ethereal and cold voice that was full of a killing intent came out of the void. Norfaller was just giving the people of the Giant Shark Clan a warning now, so they could sense the intense killing. However, once he attacked, even a sanctuary powerhouse wouldn't be able to sense the killing intent at all. However, Grina would never be able to tolerate such a situation. He pushed away the divine general, who was standing in front of him, and looked at the members of the Tower of Dusk. Why? Do you want to attack us? You must not want to leave the endless ocean in one piece. Grina was not scaring them. Although the Giant Shark Clan could not be considered the ruler of the endless ocean now, no one would doubt their ability to dominate given their current power. For a force that made a living on sea, offending the Giant Shark Clan on the endless ocean would be tantamount to digging their own grave. However, in the face of Grina's threat, the people of the Tower of Dusk did not react much, as if they weren't aware of the Giant Shark Clan's existence. Of course, apart from Connorus and the others, the mages of the Tower of Dusk really didn't know much about the Giant Shark Clan. Besides, the mages of the Tower of Dusk had always been very confident in their president, especially since they could make it back from Cursed Island under Lin Li's leadership. Having witnessed with their very own eyes how capable and formidable their president was, they definitely wouldn't take Grina's threat seriously. Connorus and others were even more nonchalant. Lin Li was the only one they respected and the only person whose orders they would obey. They did everything he told them to without considering the consequences at all. Besides, they knew Lin Li's strength even better than the others, and were also aware of the trump cards that he had. Although the Giant Shark Clan had 4 sanctuary powerhouses here, they were confident of defeating them if they really got into a fight. However, as tension arose, and they were about to get into an intense fight anytime soon, Elder Zoomer and his apprentice, Forcus, happened to arrive in time. Elder Zoomer and Forcus came over this time to get in touch with Lin Li. After all, they had to rely on Lin Li to carry out the resurrection plan of the founding saint of the Illuminati. However, when he saw what was going on, Elder Zoomer could not help but cry out in his heart, regretting his decision to come because he had arrived at the wrong time. This is such a disadvantage. Elder Zoomer was extremely frustrated, but since he had unfortunately encountered such a matter, he couldn't really act like he didn't see anything, especially since Lin Li was still of great use to the Illuminati now. If they got into a conflict, the Illuminati wouldn't be able to handle the resurrection on their own. Thinking about the trade-offs, Elder Zoomer was extremely conflicted. He then exclaimed, "Please don't be impulsive, let's talk properly." While saying that, he walked towards the spot in between the 2 parties together with his disciple, Forcus. However, as soon as he did, Elder Zoomer couldn't help but shudder as he could vaguely sense an ethereal killing intent sweeping past his body. Back on Cursed Island, he had watched Norfaller, the vampire of the Tower of Dusk, ascend to the sanctuary realm. Hence, he immediately figured out why the Giant Shark Clan would be that nervous. No one would be able to stay calm if they were targeted by an assassin who was at the sanctuary realm. What made Elder Zoomer feel particularly troubled was the fact that the leader of the Giant Shark clan was Grina, the prince of the Giant Shark clan. Having been developing on the Endless Ocean for so many years, the Illuminati inevitably had to deal with the sea clans. Hence, Elder Zoomer was rather familiar with Grina. The people of the Giant Shark clan had always been extremely haughty and arrogant. After all, everyone knew how powerful the Giant Shark clan was, and Grina, the prince of the Giant Shark clan, was even more conceited. Now that Grina was being disregarded by the assertive President Flick of the Tower of Dusk, who wouldn't tolerate disrespect, it was difficult for Elder Zoomer to persuade any of them. Elder Zoomer's appearance eased up some of the tension at the scene, but the attitude of both parties remained largely the same. If they had been pretending, one of the parties would likely have used this opportunity to give themselves an out, but clearly neither of them was. Elder Zoomer stood in the middle between the two sides, feeling the fury of one party and the cold killing intent of the other. He really wanted to just stay out of it and leave, but for the sake of the interests of the Illuminati, he had no choice but to get involved. Thus, he chuckled bitterly, and said, "Prince Grina, and my friends from the Tower of Dusk, please simmer down. We can always talk things over calmly." Although Elder Zoomer had intervened in time, he still hadn't figured out how the Tower of Dusk and the Giant Shark clan got involved with each other. He wouldn't be surprised if it was someone from the Gilded Kingdom that was confronting the Tower of Dusk, but it was Grina of the Giant Shark clan, who had just come to the Gilded Kingdom. Although Elder Zoomer was a prestigious figure of the Gilded Kingdom, he was far inferior compared to the prince of the Giant Shark clan. However, no matter what, Elder Zoomer was still backed by the Illuminati. After all, Grina could disregard Elder Zoomer, but not the Illuminati. Hence, Grina got a grip on his anger and humphed coldly, "Zoomer, this matter has nothing to do with you. If I don't teach the person who had the guts to offend me a hard lesson, he won't learn that there are some people in the Endless Ocean that he cannot afford to mess with." Grina did not give Elder Zoomer a chance to make peace, and instead made his decision to go against the Tower of Dusk clear. Thus, Elder Zoomer couldn't say what he had prepared to, and had no choice but to turn to the Tower of Dusk. He said, "My dear friends of the Tower of Dusk, can anyone tell me what is going on here?" On the Tower of Dusk's side, Doric, the deputy head of the Mage Legion, was about to tell Elder Zoomer the reason for the conflict, but Connorus glared at him to stop him. Immediately afterwards, Connorus turned to look at Elder Zoomer, and smilingly said, "Elder Zoomer, you don't have to care about this. We happen to want to see just how capable the Giant Shark clan is to have the audacity to say that all beings of the Endless Ocean should obey them." Although Connorus was once an ancient demon deity who was a master of deceit and conspiracy, he now possessed a powerful and perfect body. If he wanted to reach the sanctuary realm, he would have to hone his skills through battles in addition to comprehension. Hence, Connorus no longer avoided battles, and instead yearned to have more of them. Before following Lin Li to the Cursed Land, he had indeed encountered a lot of battles, but they were of too high a level for Connorus to participate in. The power of the incarnation of the Serpents of Light and the Demigod High Priest Poa were far greater than his, so he couldn't quite sharpen his skills by fighting with them. Fortunately, Lin Li caught 2 light-winged angels, and gave them to Connorus for research, which concluded his trip fruitfully. However, the light-winged angels were life forms that could be created only by gods. Connorus was not even in the sanctuary realm yet, so it wouldn't be easy for him to comprehend anything out of them. Hence, honing his skills and abilities through battles was still very important to Connorus, as it was one of the most feasible ways that he could use to reach the sanctuary realm. In Connorus' opinion, the Giant Shark clan was a good opponent. For the sake of stepping into the sanctuary realm, Connorus didn't bother to think about what consequences it would cause. In Connorus' opinion, how to deal with the ensuing consequences that might include the retaliation of the Giant Shark clan, or a war, was for Lin Li to consider. Since Lin Li wasn't worried now, there was naturally no need for Connorus to be afraid of causing any trouble. Elder Zoomer couldn't help but feel vexed and dismayed to have failed to persuade either party. Fortunately, his disciple Forcus approached at this juncture and told Elder Zoomer softly about everything that he had found out from the onlookers. The Giant Shark clan, one of the 7 overlords of the ocean, and the Tower of Dusk, which had recently become a household name in the Gilded Kingdom, were significant enough to be able to garner attention from the people for every little thing they did. Besides, they were now going toe-to-toe against each other. Hence, there had long been many onlookers crowding around the embassy, and they were naturally aware of what happened since the beginning. After listening to Forcus' words, Elder Zoomer finally figured out why the Giant Shark clan suddenly confronted the Tower of Dusk. However, learning of the reason actually made him find the problem trickier and the situation harder to handle, because unlike a minor conflict that could be resolved with some persuasion, it was something more serious. Being a member of high status in the Illuminati, Elder Zoomer more or less knew why Grina was insistent on having those seahorse slaves. Since the Great Ocean War's end, the giant shark clan had been going around capturing seahorse slaves at all costs. Everyone knew that there was nothing extraordinary about the strength of the seahorse slaves, very few among which could reach the legendary realm. If the giant shark clan just wanted to capture some slaves for hard labor, it didn't seem necessary to insist on picking the seahorse slaves. Hence, many forces that had been paying attention to the giant shark clan, including the Illuminati, had a conjecture about the giant shark clan's peculiar behavior regarding the seahorse slaves. They believed that they had likely gone to great lengths to capture the seahorse slaves, for the sale of the relics of the former seahorse royals to obtain their powerful secrets. Although there were many forces that also tried to capture some seahorse slaves, in hopes of finding out something from them, the research results were a huge disappointment to them. The reason that most of the seahorse slaves could not reach the legendary realm was purely because they lacked talent, just like the other clans that could not reach the legendary realm. However, while countless people of the human race and other intelligent races failed to enter the legendary realm, there were also many geniuses that continued to appear, yet there seemed to be no geniuses in the Seahorse clan. If those who couldn't reach the legendary realm were considered wastrels, the Seahorse clan would be a complete good-for-nothing. However, the giant shark clan had obtained the largest slice of the pie during the Ocean War, and no one knew what secrets they held. Perhaps there were some secrets about the royals of the Seahorse clan. Otherwise, there was no way they could explain their attitude towards the Seahorse clan. Therefore, regardless of whether there were secrets or not, and regardless of what the secrets were, Elder Zoomer was certain about one thing: it would be a Herculean task to make Grina give up on the idea of acquiring the Seahorse slaves. Can I try to persuade President Flick of the Tower of Dusk to give up those Seahorse slaves that he has already bought? At this point, Elder Zoomer felt even more vexed. If it were someone else, he might be somewhat confident, but Lin Li was an exception. Look at what Lin Li did after he came to the Gilded Kingdom. In a fit of rage, he destroyed the 5th fleet of the Gilded Kingdom, and not long after that, he razed the barracks of the kingdom's royal guards to the ground. That was a huge insult to the Gilded Kingdom. Elder Zoomer could tell from those two incidents that Lin Li was definitely not the type who would be willing to give in easily, especially when the other party wanted to do things the hard way. Lin Li would definitely be more insistent and vehement than the other party in those cases. My friends from the Tower of Dusk, could you ask President Flick to come out for us to have a good talk? They're just some slaves. There's no need to get into such a huge conflict because of this. Although Elder Zoomer knew that the situation was difficult to handle, he couldn't just ignore it. Hence, he merely hoped that Lin Li would come out for his sake. Elder Zoomer, you don't have to go on. I know what you want to say, and I can answer on Flick's behalf. He has spent his money on those seahorse slaves, so they're his rightful property. If you want those slaves, you have to either have some ties with him, or have enough power. I doubt any of those giant shark clan members have either of those two qualities, so I'm afraid they can forget about it. Connorus was bent on getting physical with the giant shark clan, and thus he was obviously full of contempt towards the giant shark clan when speaking about them. Of course, he wasn't simply taking matters into his own hands, but rather he knew that Lin Li didn't respect the giant shark clan at all. Otherwise, Lin Li wouldn't have been unwilling to see them. In that case, it meant that there was no room for negotiation. As expected, after hearing the words of Connorus, the people of the giant shark clan lost their temper. One of the 4 divine generals, Zoro, took 2 steps past Elder Zoomer and tried to punch Connorus. He furiously hollered, "You're just a legendary level ant, and yet you dare to speak so shamelessly. In this case, we'll show you if the giant shark clan has the ability or not." Connorus' strength was only at the peak of the legendary level, and the people around them could clearly tell that Zoro, who was one of the 4 divine generals, was a level 27 sanctuary powerhouse. The two of them were definitely worlds apart. When Zoro struck, the people around almost immediately guessed that the legendary powerhouse of the Tower of Dusk was definitely going to be blown to pieces. Elder Zoomer was horrified, and he was torn between watching Connorus get killed and intervening to block Zoro's attack. All of a sudden, he was at a loss for what to do. If Connorus, a member of the Tower of Dusk, was killed, Lin Li would definitely go to war with the giant shark clan given his character. However, if Elder Zoomer were to block Zoro's strike, the giant shark clan would definitely hate him and the Illuminati, and that would be giving the Illuminati a powerful enemy for no reason. All in all, Elder Zoomer had seen how Connorus attacked back in the Land of Curses, and although he had a certain understanding of Connorus' strength, he didn't think that Connorus was strong enough to contend with Zoro, a sanctuary powerhouse. In fact, Zoro's punch was indeed not simple at all. The fluctuations emitted from the laws of the power even allowed a ferocious ancient giant shark to be condensed in thin air. It opened its large mouth and pounced on Connorus. Despite considering the fact that they were now on the turf of the Gilded Kingdom, Zoro didn't use any destructive martial arts techniques and instead just condensed his power and struck with his fist. However, his power was definitely not something that a legendary level powerhouse could resist. The plan he had in mind was that he would blast the embassy of the Tower of Dusk into pieces after killing the nobody with a single punch, and force Philip to appear. Hey, this guy is mine. Faced with the punch that Zoro launched, Connorus remained calm without showing a single trace of horror. Instead, he even seemed a little joyous. He was saying those words to Norfaler, who had already merged into space. Having finally found such an opponent like Zoro, Connorus didn't want Zoro to be pressured into retreating by Norfaler's assassination. Although Norfaler was usually cold and aloof, he wasn't unkind and inhumane, especially since Connorus was on his side. Hence, after hearing Connorus' words, Norfaler did not make a single move or strike at Zoro. Instead, he locked his killing intent on the other people of the giant shark clan. As for whether Connorus could withstand the attack of a sanctuary powerhouse, it was not something that was within his consideration. Even if Connorus got killed, he'd purely bring it upon himself. On the other hand, since Connorus dared to confront and challenge a sanctuary powerhouse, he naturally also had something to fall back on. Although in terms of level, he and Zoro of the giant shark clan were worlds apart, his perfect body allowed his strength to far surpass that of the people who were at the peak of the legendary realm. In fact, this perfect body itself was at the sanctuary realm. How could High Lord Osric have possibly provided a legendary level body for himself? However, Connorus still hadn't been able to fully exert the power of the perfect body. Otherwise, he would have long reached the sanctuary realm. Hence, in the face of the punch launched by Zoro the sanctuary powerhouse, Connorus didn't even bother to take out the eternal frost blade, and instead punched him back. He wasn't as formidable as Zoro, and he looked like an ordinary person swinging his fist. In the eyes of everyone else, he was just like a praying mantis swinging its scythes at an ancient beast. In an instant, their fists collided, and the scene that appeared in front of everyone was that of a relatively thin person's fist landing on the giant shark's large mouth. Everyone thought that Connorus should be getting swallowed by the giant shark's mouth and chewed into bits. However, the stranger thing was that a few seconds passed, and the two of them, whose strength was obviously worlds apart, seemed to have reached a stalemate. Immediately afterwards, a sight that made them even more flabbergasted appeared. Large cracks suddenly appeared from the spot that Connorus and Zoro's fist collided, and quickly spread out towards its body. At this moment, the loud sound of the explosion spread to the ears of the crowd, who watched as the giant shark's phantom burst like a fragile bubble. Zoro, one of the famous 4 divine generals of the giant shark clan, was suddenly blasted away. Even Elder Zoomer, who was still hesitant, was so stunned that his jaw dropped and remained wide open for a long time. Connorus, who was only at the peak of the legendary realm, actually blasted away a sanctuary powerhouse. Why is the Tower of Dusk full of such perverse monsters? The young president, who stepped into the sanctuary realm a long time ago, could even resist the attacks launched by a demigod? There's also that vampire that went against the laws of common sense and became an unprecedented sanctuary-level vampire. Now, Connorus, who should be relatively ordinary, was actually able to blast away a sanctuary powerhouse, despite being only at the peak of the legendary level. Is there anything that the Tower of Dusk cannot do? Among everyone, the one who was the most astonished and bewildered was Zoro, who had personally experienced the power of Connorus. If the latter had been at the same level as him, Zoro would still have been able to comfort himself. After all, he didn't really exert the power of the sanctuary realm to the fullest. However, the problem was that Connorus was only at the peak of the legendary level, and was an ant in the eyes of the sanctuary powerhouses. If Zoro hadn't experienced it himself, he would have never believed that such an absurd thing could be true. Finally, the group of the giant shark clan too realized what an unbelievable thing had happened. Garcia, who was also one of the 4 divine generals, immediately emitted the might of the sanctuary realm. Terrifying power condensed in his hands immediately, and he was about to unleash a destructive attack on Connorus. However, at this juncture, a cold light appeared out of nowhere in front of Garcia's chest before piercing right through his heart. It appeared without warning, and the killing intent that had previously been fixed on Garcia remained unchanged too. Immediately afterwards, a sanguine light appeared, and a bloodied hole emerged in Garcia's chest. Garcia put his hands together in a bid to blast away the enemy in front of him, only to end up missing. Norfaler, who had fused with the space, had already retreated God knew where. Fortunately, unlike the human race, the hearts of the Sea clan were located in the center of their bodies, slightly below their throat. Although Norfaler was a sanctuary-level assassin, he clearly didn't understand the physical structure of the Sea clans very well, so he assassinated him as he would humans. In the end, he merely poked a hole in Garcia's body. Unlike the sanctuary-level mages, powerhouses of the giant shark clan like Garcia used their strong bodies and their mastery of the laws of power to reach the sanctuary realm. They couldn't create large and powerful domain worlds like mages could, but their bodies themselves were like domain worlds. Hence, for sanctuary powerhouses like Garcia, who had already reached level 27, being stabbed and having a hole born in their chests would be considered a minor injury as long as their heads or hearts were not destroyed. Having their limbs severed wouldn't be fatal for them, because their limbs had the ability to regenerate rather rapidly. However, the issue now was not about the severity of their injuries. Garcia was stabbed in the chest by a sword before he could even attack, which was a blatant insult to his face. If he had been stabbed from behind, or somewhere that was impossible to defend, he might feel somewhat comforted. The fact that he couldn't even defend himself against an attack that came from the front was too embarrassing. Zoro, who had been blasted away by Konoris, was feeling just as ashamed and miserable, even though he didn't sustain any injuries. At the very least, Garcia's opponent was a rare sanctuary-level vampire. However, Zoro was blasted away by the punch of a legendary-level opponent, which made him feel more humiliated than Garcia. Hence, after landing firmly on the ground, Zoro did not stop for a single second, and immediately charged towards Konoris again. He wasn't convinced that Konoris was stronger than him, and he believed that the reason for the current situation was merely because he had underestimated Konoris. Hence, the only way he could regain his pride would be to destroy Konoris with massive power. In a certain sense, Zoro's mindset was right. The difference between the peak legendary realm and the sanctuary realm was a difference in power, which could not be made up for by increasing quantity. However, he probably never expected Konoris to be a freak, who was at the legendary realm but had a perfect body that was at the sanctuary level. Besides, his perfect body was even comparable to that of the Wyrms and the Titans. The giant shark clan had powerful bodies, but they seemed inferior to the perfect body. Konoris' situation was akin to a Titan-level alchemy colossus being manipulated by a greenhorn. Although the controller's skills had not reached the level of perfection yet, it wouldn't affect the level of the Titan-level alchemy colossus. Even if the alchemy colossus couldn't be used to perform any fancy tricks, each punch that it launched was at the level of the Titans. That was the reason that Konoris could fight a sanctuary powerhouse, despite being only at the legendary level. Seeing that Zoro rushed forth again, Konoris smiled and dashed towards the former like a bolt of lightning. In the blink of an eye, their figures collided with a thunderous roar that filled the air. Amidst the dense roar, the aftershocks of power rippled through space and spread in all directions like ripples on water. Even the blind could tell that it was no longer just probing. Zoro's punches contained so much power that they seemed to be able to break through space. The ancient giant shark condensed from the power fluctuations began twisting its body and leapt onto Konoris vigorously like a shark that had smelled the odor of blood. The battle had already begun, and the people of the giant shark clan below naturally couldn't stand by and watch without doing anything like they did just now. In particular, they were really shocked by what happened to Garcia and Zoro because it made them realize that the small and nameless force could not be dealt with as easily as they had imagined. Seeing that 2 of the 4 divine generals had been attacked by the members of the Tower of Dusk, the arrogant and snobbish Grina immediately felt his face turning hot. Just now, he threatened them and said that he would make sure that they couldn't leave the endless ocean alive. Yet, his divine generals couldn't even defeat the other party. Although he wasn't the one at a disadvantage, it was just like an insult to him. However, just when Grina signaled his men to prepare for action, the killing intent that shrouded all the giant shark clan members suddenly vanished without a trace. They didn't relax or let their guards down. Instead, they tensed up even more and protected Grina by standing around him. They all knew that the appearance of that killing intent was just a warning from Norfaler, the sanctuary realm vampire. However, the disappearance of the killing intent didn't mean that they were no longer in danger, because assassins tended to conceal their killing intent right before they attacked. If the killing intent could be detected, they wouldn't be considered true assassins. Although Grina and many of his subordinates were enraged and really wanted to kill the people of the Tower of Dusk, they had no choice but to curb their anger in the face of the threat of a sanctuary-level vampire. Seeing that Konoris and Zoro were fighting, Elder Zoomer knew that if he didn't intervene and do something about it, there would probably be huge trouble. Hence, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and open his domain world before rushing up to the sky and stopping between Zoro and Konoris. Elder Zoomer's intervention was so abrupt that it caught Zoro and Connorus off guard. Two terrifying forces immediately blasted against his domain world. Although Elder Zoomer was also a high-level sanctuary powerhouse, he had a hard time withstanding the simultaneous attack from Zoro and Connorus. His domain world was an oceanic world, and it seemed to have been turned upside down after being bombarded by both the forces at the same time. It resulted in an apocalyptic scene of space shattering and water gushing in. In Elder Zoomer's domain world, a blue crystal pillar quickly began rotating rapidly, emitting layers of power that was quickly repairing the damage of the domain world. Fortunately, Zoro and Connorus also coincidentally stopped at this juncture. Otherwise, even with the help of the divine sea pillar, Elder Zoomer's domain world probably would have collapsed in the end. Everyone, please listen to me. Don't forget that this is the capital of the Gilded Kingdom. Fighting here is very disrespectful to the Gilded Kingdom, Elder Zoomer said anxiously after seeing that the two people had finally stopped fighting for the time being. However, both of them started fighting again before he could even finish speaking. Hearing Elder Zoomer mention the Gilded Kingdom, Grina couldn't help but frown. Although the Giant Shark Clan was one of the 7 hegemons of the Endless Ocean, it didn't mean that they could really do whatever they wanted in the Endless Ocean. After all, the Giant Shark Clan was not the ruler of the entire Endless Ocean. The Giant Shark Clan was very powerful, but the Gilded Kingdom definitely wasn't weak. The Gilded Kingdom managed to dominate and stand tall in the Endless Ocean for thousands of years, all because of their true power and strength. The Giant Shark Clan had powerful giant shark knights, while the Gilded Kingdom had giant alchemical battleships that gained a great reputation through dominating the Endless Ocean. They were not inferior to the giant shark knights at all. The most important thing was that the Gilded Kingdom had been staying out of the wars between the sea clans, which allowed the 7 sea clans to strike a subtle balance. If the Gilded Kingdom opposed the Giant Shark Clan, it would definitely have a huge impact on the development of the latter. Likewise, if they became allies with the Giant Shark Clan, the Giant Shark Clan would probably be a huge step closer to unifying the sea clans. Grina and his men came to attend the Gilded Kingdom's founding celebration in hopes of getting closer to the Gilded Kingdom, so that they could reach some kind of agreement. If they created any trouble in the capital of the Gilded Kingdom this time, Grina's mission would probably be greatly affected this time. However, when the 4 divine generals were hesitating, Grina laughed out loud and said, "I'm afraid you have an ulterior motive for saying this, don't you, Elder Zoomer? I've heard about the conflict between the Gilded Kingdom and the Tower of Dusk. Bradler would probably want us to teach the Tower of Dusk a lesson for him. Besides, you are an elder of the Illuminati, not an elder of the Gilded Kingdom, so how can your words represent the Gilded Kingdom?" Grina was wavering at first, but he soon thought of the information regarding the Tower of Dusk shamming the Gilded Kingdom twice he heard previously. Regardless of the reason for Bradler's decision to tolerate it for the time being, Grina believed that Bradler would probably be glad if he taught the Tower of Dusk a lesson. It might even be more helpful to his mission on this trip instead. Elder Zoomer was at a loss for words. He would never tell anyone the real reason that the Gilded Kingdom was being tolerant towards the Tower of Dusk, and his identity indeed did not give him the right to represent the Gilded Kingdom. Hence, Elder Zoomer actually didn't know what to say in response to Grina's words. Seeing Elder Zoomer's behavior, Grina was even more convinced that his conjectures were true. He waved his hand and asked his men to launch an attack on the people of the Tower of Dusk. 2 divine generals had to stay by his side to protect him, but he had many other legendary level guards. Coupled with sanctuary powerhouses like Zoro and Garcia, they could easily destroy a small and nameless force. After all, although Zoro and Garcia had suffered some losses, it only concerned their pride. It didn't mean that Connorus and Norfaller were really stronger than them. Besides, now that Zoro and Garcia should be aware of their opponent's strength, they should have no problems in the next clash. Apart from the 2 divine generals, who remained by Grina's side to protect him, the other legendary level guards immediately moved towards the embassy of the Tower of Dusk after receiving Grina's orders. In their eyes, other than Connorus and Norfaller, who seemed to have some capabilities, the members of the Tower of Dusk were simply insignificant. Faced with the compulsion of the approaching Giant Shark Clan members, the mages of the Tower of Dusk quietly drew their magic staffs without much emotion and arranged the magic net array. They then got into standby. Although Ufalusi did not summon the hand of the mage, he didn't loaf around either, and instead touched the skeleton staff while the death aura around him gradually became denser. Seeing that more trouble was about to happen, Elder Zoomer suddenly had a flash of inspiration and exclaimed, "Wait, Prince Grina, this is the capital of the Gilded Kingdom. No matter what, and all matters should be handled by the Gilded Kingdom. Since I can't represent the Gilded Kingdom, I'll ask someone who can represent the Gilded Kingdom to come here. Stop. Although he was skeptical about Elder Zoomer's words, Grina nevertheless temporarily told his subordinates to stop. It wasn't that he didn't believe Elder Zoomer's words, but rather he thought that Elder Zoomer did make some sense because he ought to inform someone from the Gilded Kingdom even though he might be standing up for them. Although he just wanted to vent his anger, it would be great if he could gain some benefits from this too. Seeing that Grina seemed to have finally accepted his advice, Elder Zoomer immediately summoned his disciple, Forcas, and instructed him to go to the royal palace immediately and report to King Bradler about what happened here. In fact, Forcas didn't think that Bradler would still stand on the Tower of Dusk's side after being humiliated by them twice. After all, he didn't have the right to know the true reason for Bradler's tolerance for the Tower of Dusk. However, since Elder Zoomer had instructed him to do that, he had no choice but to do as he was told. Yes, teacher, Forcas answered, and immediately headed to the palace. The embassy area was not far from the palace, and Forcas didn't dare to delay at all. Hence, it only took him a few minutes to reach the gate of the palace. Immediately afterwards, the guards went to report, and Forcas was soon brought to King Bradler under the lead of the palace guards. After a detailed discussion with Saint Edmund, Bradler's attitude toward the Tower of Dusk had also changed dramatically. Previously, he had pretended to hold the Tower of Dusk with great respect when receiving them, and the other forces of the breezy plains, all for the sake of avoiding conflict. However, he hadn't really taken them seriously at all. However, King Bradler was now considering how to form good relations with the Tower of Dusk. Unfortunately, the two incidents had put a strain on the relationship between the Gilded Kingdom and the Tower of Dusk. Bradler would never swallow his pride and curry favor with Lin Li. Hence, building good relations with the Tower of Dusk had become one of his greatest troubles.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.